Alright, hey everybody, welcome to part 1 of my maybe 15-part series about how I went to Japan and what happened on the trip, which has eventually been dubbed the Anime Tourist Trap Trip. So this will eventually add up to a giant video about everything that happened once I finish all 15 parts and I put them together. But in the meantime, I'm going to release them one by one because why the fuck not? Anyway, everything I'm talking about is pretty wildly different in terms of vibes and what happened, so I'm going to sum it all up to the following. I used to live in Japan. I don't anymore. I almost starved to death, the food prices were high, the prices for everything were high, and I suffered from constant racism and I didn't achieve my dreams. I decided to come back this year to sell the score, close out small business, and mostly do a summer vacation entirely of anime tourist traps, entirely during one of the country's most brutally hot weeks on historical record, with an average temperature of 110 degrees Fahrenheit or over 41 degrees Celsius. Some of my friends came with me on this trip to see and experience some of these traps, but I'm going to obfuscate their identities in this video to keep it as vague as possible, and the point is I was there and I wasn't always alone. I might do some of these videos as storytime animations because in some places I was forbidden or forgot to take photos of what actually was going on, but I still actually remember what happened. Anyway, let's get into it. So, this time around I flew into Haneda Airport instead of Narita. I had previously always flown into Narita, but this time I finally put it together and I finally contextualized that even though it's technically cheaper to fly into Narita, it's not. Because Narita Airport is northeast of Tokyo, the money you save by flying there is completely canceled out by the travel expense of having to travel back and forth from urban Tokyo to way too far out there in Narita. So I discovered on this trip that Haneda Airport is actually way nicer than Narita, and I guess it's because they're in the process of significantly overhauling it and updating it. And previously Haneda had the reputation for being the older, less maintained airport, but I guess now in this year the situation's flipped. And so I returned to Japan, and I was immediately greeted by the most technologically menacing and largest toilet I've ever seen in my life. Look at all these crazy accessories, what the fuck. Anyway, on my first night back, immediately after arriving into Haneda, close to midnight, I decided to stay at Haneda's infamous robot airport hotel, which kind of seems like a meme and kind of seems like a joke. It's been known about online for a couple years now, and it's kind of a funny thing, because whenever any news organization is just having the worst, slowest news day, they'll bring up, hey, did you know there's this robot hotel in Tokyo run entirely by robots? Maybe that's the future. Maybe in some dystopia, maybe in some crazy year, all businesses will fire all their employees and replace them with robots. Anyway, so yeah, I jumped off my plane and immediately went straight for my first tourist trap, the Tokyo Robot Hotel. And now I'm going to tell you how much of a tourist trap was it.
この番組はヨランのスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
And I'd overall say it's pretty high up there on the tourist trap ranking. Like at the end of the day, when you break it all down, it's really just a normal hotel with the front desk staff replaced by 2 robot dinosaurs and a robot woman, and somehow you're paying double the price of your usual hotel for all that. Well, the robot hotel was created, I want to say, over 5 years ago when it was a groundbreaking idea that Japan would be entirely saved by robot workers and not people having sex. In the age of Elon Musk and his now oppressive army of clankers, it's not quite as charming. Also, making things worse, when I arrived at the hotel close to midnight, the 2 robot dinosaurs had already shut down for the night, leaving only the robot woman acting as a bare minimum concierge, and she wasn't that helpful. So the robot hotel is pretty much a gimmick at the end of the day. The robot concierge just walks you through signing in through a console, and that's basically it. The big deal at the end of the day is you do more work to sign out through a self-checkout system, and that's really what you're paying double for, a self-checkout system. A few days later, I stayed at a Toyoko Inn further in Tokyo, and it had the exact same self-checkout system, except the concierge was not a robot. And since she wasn't a robot, she was able to hold my bags for me while I checked in, and then when I went to the beach afterwards, she gave me a coupon to buy things, and that was pretty nice of her. Now, for the record, I also realized after the fact that I have no idea how holding my bags would have worked if I had needed my bags held, if I had shown up early before I could log into the hotel, or if I had to switch hotels slowly throughout the day. I'd also heard that the hotel's entire staff were robots and had kind of been given this mental image of this decrepit building, this giant robot terrarium, crawling with all these effective robot insects that keep it clean and tidy. But maybe that's no longer the case because they did seem to have a human maid staff, a human cleanup staff, and a kitchen crew keeping everything working and running throughout the night. I really can't imagine that there was ever a time where they fully laid off all the human employees and replaced them all with robots. So that's sort of a lie, maybe just a myth. When we checked out in the morning, the robot dinosaurs were finally activated, but they really just kind of move around and roar at you. The last big trap / gimmick of the robot hotel is that it is extremely close to Haneda Airport. And while it's true that there are honestly closer hotels, even closer to the airport, if you really wanted to split hairs about it, the thing is that this hotel is about 20 minutes away by bus or car, and it's only 3 stops down the line on the subway. Now, a lot of people I noticed besides me were staying here just to get quick access to the airport, and the robots are there kind of to sucker people in with the quirkiness and the uniqueness of the experience. Because I do have to point out that on a certain level, you kind of need a hotel in Tokyo because the trains stop running after 11 p.m., and then taking a taxi from this hotel to the airport is the only way to reach the airport in the middle of the night. So by being close to the airport, you're saving money on the taxi. But now that I've fully seen it myself and fully comprehended it with my own eyes, I want to say while it's not the worst hotel near the airport, and maybe on a certain level the robot staff maybe could help people checking out at 3 a.m. in the morning for a red-eye flight, there's definitely probably cheaper and closer options near the airport that I could have gone with instead if I just wanted to stay at a hotel near the airport. I really just came to this hotel to see those infamous robot dinosaurs and assess what the hell the deal was. So in conclusion, is the robot hotel in Tokyo a tourist trap? Yeah, 100%. It's a massive, huge tourist trap. The robots weren't even turned on when I got there, and they give worse service than any human concierge, which is kind of big when you're in a foreign country and you don't understand Japanese perfectly. So the only justifiable reason to stay at this hotel is the story of, hey, I did it. Hey, one time I stayed at this hotel run by robots, and it was just a robot hotel. They did have some goofy luxury themed rooms available, but I couldn't afford any of those. I just stayed at the standard cheapest room in the hotel, which was cramped and barely livable. And yeah, nothing really to write home about. The room wasn't any better or worse than any other Japanese hotel I've ever seen. So in conclusion, yeah, this one's a tourist trap. I would say if you really want to see a robot hotel, go see it. But if you're just looking for a hotel to stay near the airport, there are definitely cheaper and better options. Okay, update addendum here. So I actually found this article here from thetravel.com that apparently details that very recently, last March, like 5 months ago, apparently the robot hotel started laying off the robots and replacing them with human workers. Very ironic, actually. But yeah, as it turns out running a hotel entirely of robots didn't always work because the robots just would always fail whenever they found an unexpected problem, which apparently happens very frequently at your average hotel. So yeah, I guess the reason that the robot hotel was so expensive and the robots were performing so poorly is because I guess the robots are actively being phased out right now. So I guess that changes my review a little bit, just because now that I think if they are in the process of phasing it out, maybe there is more reason to go there. So I guess I feel lucky I went there before it no longer exists. But at the same time, the robots had already been phased out at such a level that I really don't feel like I got the so-called social media robot hotel experience that everyone was advertising. And maybe that's also why I feel disappointed in the trip, on top of the fact that I paid basically double to get nothing. All right, yeah, that's the end of that. So I woke up pretty jet lagged the next morning after staying the night in the robot hotel, which I reviewed in the last video. And so first things first, after arriving to Japan, I immediately went on an immediate pilgrimage to Odaiba Diver City to see the Gundam Unicorn statue and the mall that sits behind it, containing the Gundam base Tokyo. Now, this was entirely a strategic choice on my part because as I was traveling through Tokyo, Odaiba lay strategically between Haneda and Tokyo. And long story short, I went on this entire trip through Japan in a giant circle. So this was my one time I had to go there on the path I was going on. I guess I should also mention that across the way from Diver City is Sega Joypolis, the Sega arcade/studio theme park that I went to 15 years ago to play a really strange, badly executed live-action version of the Phoenix Wright video game, specifically the crime scene examination part, where you just kind of have to find murder clues inside a cluttered room. And across the way on the other side of the street is Fuji TV, which I did a video about before, and I think that video has been suppressed and self-joked out by the algorithm, so if you want to see some dirty things that Fuji TV did, here's a link. But anyway, I wasn't there to see any of that because I'd seen it already, and also I don't think Fuji TV allows random people from the public to enter the building. I was simply there to see the Unicorn Gundam statue in its full glory, and overall I'm kind of glad I took time out of my day here to go and do that because it ended up being really cool.
この番組はヨランのスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
Anyway, alright, so this is my one time witnessing the Gundam Unicorn statue, and I'm pretty glad I saw it. Here's why this matters. The first time I ever traveled to Japan in my life was to witness the completion of the Shizuoka RX-78-2 and the first 1/1 Gundam constructed at the Bandai factory in Shizuoka. This Gundam eventually moved to Diver City, where it stood for a few years until it got old and rusty. When it got old and rusty, it was disassembled, and if my lore is right, pieces of it were then recycled and then put into the moving Gundam at Yokohama, and that Gundam also got old and rusty because it was right next to the ocean, so that was then disassembled and recycled again for the Gundam Pavilion at the Osaka World's Fair. So by the rules of the ship as Theseus, the Shizuoka RX-78 barely exists, as it's now been rebuilt 4 different times in 4 different places and looks completely different. And somehow it now lives in Osaka, unless I'm wrong and the Osaka Gundam is actually a completely different Gundam, and really doesn't actually contain the parts from the Shizuoka Gundam. I also want to say, despite the Unicorn Gundam being a pretty signature landmark of Tokyo, having appeared in such beloved films like Pacific Rim 2, to Ring 2 Furious, I'm a tad concerned right now that maybe the Unicorn Gundam is not long for the world. See, the Unicorn's signature thing is that it lights up at night and it transforms between its NTD mode and its non-awakened Unicorn mode. But as the statue is now pushing 10 years of age, it's definitely had more and more mechanical problems over the years, having weathered its way through a few typhoons and a few floods, and when I got there it had a situation where the arms just simply would no longer transform, and my understanding is that the arm mechanisms have been broken for quite a while, and they either can't or won't fix it. As a result, there's currently an unconfirmed conspiracy online that the Unicorn Gundam is not long for this world, especially as the Gundam Unicorn anime itself has waned in public consciousness in terms of relevance. It hasn't had a new episode in like over 10 years after all, and the ongoing theory right now is that eventually the Unicorn will be knocked down and replaced with a totally different Gundam. Maybe the G-Quux, maybe something else. Maybe the Gundam Mark II. Nah, that would be a downgrade. Anyway, nothing's been officially announced, but the fact that they've gotten lax about fixing the thing is probably a bad sign. Now, looking carefully at the picture I took, I can see 2 of the panels are ajar, but they otherwise seem to be collected, and anyway, due to our busy schedule, we weren't able to stay at Diver City to the night to check out the Transformation Night Show. But anyway, here's the photo I took of it from behind and from above, where you got a bunch of women cringing in the side in the 110-degree heat. Now, I tried to talk to these women about what the hell they were doing and what the hell was going on, and I got an unclear answer that they were just lined up outside to buy cosmetics or something. Now, what the heck is that? What the heck were they waiting outside half the day in the 100-degree sun for? Who the hell knows? Anyway, yeah, I might as well also talk about how I got this picture. I got this incredible seat at the La Ohana Hawaiian restaurant on the 6th floor of Diver City, which parked me relatively right behind the head of the Unicorn Gundam. And the food there was also super amazing and super cheap. Since we were very jet-lagged, we ironically immediately wanted American-style breakfast, and this is probably one of the only places in Tokyo that had it. I also got handed to this place as having maybe the cheapest smoothies in the world right now at the low cost of less than 500 yen. Alright, so Unicorn Gundam aside, what else did we do in Diver City? Well, mostly frivolous shopping, as Diver City is, after all, a shopping mall. Diver City is also the otherwise newest and most popular mall in Tokyo, and yeah, we were definitely in Tokyo to shop, especially for t-shirts. It's always been one of my personal philosophies that Tokyo t-shirts put American t-shirts to shame, and there was a cool-ass cyberpunk pop-up store for both the game and the anime that had some seriously badass t-shirts. A couple of other shops also had t-shirts and anime junk, and some of my friends just went nuts buying a bunch of anime figures, which I was like, no, we just got here. You're going to have to lug that around all week. There was also a functional Toys R Us selling weird Japanese-style Toy Story figures that I thought was weird as hell. There was like a Samurai Woody guy. And we almost bought some Pokemon merch, but the Pokemon merch was just too expensive at this place. I will say, though, that Diver City, being a tourist trap mall, made it a mall that was kind of full of foreigners. I probably saw more foreigners collected in one place in Diver City than any other place in Tokyo. I would almost say there were more foreigners in Diver City than there were Japanese people. Like, the One Piece store was packed, there were a few other random Japanese souvenir shops, and probably the best and coolest store, in my opinion, in Diver City ended up being the Tokyo Godzilla store. So Godzilla is pretty big business all over Japan, and I was honestly pretty pleased on this trip how often I saw the big G-Man and gift shops related to him over the course of this trip. I saw other Godzilla stores in Saitama, Kabukicho, and Kyoto, but in my personal opinion, Diver City's Godzilla store was the absolute best one with the largest variety of Godzilla stuff. And again, since I came to Japan mostly to buy t-shirts, I bought this dank as hell Vaporwave Godzilla shirt. I thought it was the most preposterous thing they were selling, and it was pretty fucking dumb. Now, I also ended up grabbing some cheaper Pokemon shirts at the Japanese Uniqlo, and that was kind of it. I guess overall Diver City is super worth visiting because it just has so many cool and good anime stores, and the prices are overall fair. I guess you might consider it a tourist trap, but in the long scheme of things I saw in Japan, I would say at least they were actively inviting foreigners to go there, and I guess I'd consider this one of the better tourist traps. The Unicorn Gundam statue was worth visiting because it's a technological marvel, and I'm a little bit concerned that they might close or retire it someday soon. However, the trip to Odaiba wasn't all flowers and roses because at the top of Diver City is where the Gundam base Tokyo, Japan lay, and long story short, that went bad. I gave the Unicorn Gundam statue and the Diver City Mall overall a great review. I think it's a wonderful place to visit if you're new to Tokyo and you're just trying to find some anime stuff. I have to, however, make this part of the review its own video because this single place is Diver City's biggest nightmare. And it's literally just this place. This is the Rotten Worm in the otherwise beautiful Big Apple of Diver City. Now, 15 years ago, I lived in Asia, and the Gundam base back in the day was a fun little harmonious location where Gundam nerds from across the world could meet up, talk about anime, talk about what they loved about Gundam, and buy old Gundam models, build Gundams, and learn painting techniques from each other. It was like a super, super harmonious place where just everyone got along and everything was wonderful. Unfortunately, times have changed and they've ruined it.
この番組はヨランのスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
So what had basically happened here is I tried to walk into the Gundam store and I was rejected by the bouncer. The fucking Gundam store had a bouncer at the front door to kick people out like it was some sort of high-class nightclub only for the most handsome, sexiest people. And it's not that. It's a fucking toy store for fucking Gundam nerds who want to buy little robot things. Odaiba was full of amazing anime stores, and this was the only one pulling this absurd shit like this. So yeah, somehow they basically put this nightmare lottery system on the Gundam base Tokyo, and this is a textbook example of Japan ruining something with bureaucracy, Japan ruining something with capitalism gone tragically wrong. Like, somehow they've established this completely bureaucratic, completely complicated system, one of the worst systems I've ever seen, created seemingly just to keep people from entering the Gundam store and stop them from spending money. This thing is an absolute nightmare, and I guess they did this to deter scalpers, which I guess were out of control for a while because I always see people like scalping the Gundam base exclusive Gundams. But to combat the scalpers, they had initially just introduced a one product per customer per day policy, and as far as I could tell, that policy was still in place. But what made the situation even more frustrating, as I stood outside the gates of the Gundam base Tokyo, I stared inside and I saw the store completely empty at noon on a Saturday, which makes me reach the only possible conclusion here is that the system either works too well and no one can get inside, or maybe it doesn't work at all and no one can get inside. Maybe possibly this lottery system where people win lottery tickets to get inside is so hard to win that the winners just never bother to use them, which actually seems to be the case because apparently even if you actually win the lottery, you can't decide what time you enter the store. So you could spend 3 weeks selling this lottery only to find out that, oh, guess what? You can enter the store at 9 p.m. at night. I guess you want to sleep that night? Too bad. That's your only time that you're allowed in the store. Or maybe you win and that's the time where you're at work. So I want to say maybe a lot of people are winning the lottery, but then they're still not able to go. Or maybe even the lottery tickets themselves are being scalped because this is just pure absolute madness here. Like, what the hell is going on? What the hell is the point of holding a lottery to prevent the store from being crowded if now the store is just, as a result, permanently empty because no one can get inside? How the fuck are they even staying in business? It feels like this will ultimately lead the store to fail financially. So I'm so fucking pissed about this. Like, look at the photo I took. Like, even though the door was locked to only the lottery winners, I can't see a single person inside the store. And I hear this is a huge freaking store, so, you know, there could easily be 100 people in here, but they had this bouncer just kicking everybody out. Now, I wonder if I had lined up at this front door ahead of time, could I have gotten in? I don't know. What fucking sucks is I didn't know about this, and I did arrive at Diver City close to 9 a.m. in the morning when the stores mostly don't open till 11 because I was just jet lagged. Anyway, I don't know what the fuck is going on here. Worse still, it seems that apparently this lottery system is only really optimized for Japanese citizens or otherwise people who have like active Japanese phone contracts. So they've effectively used this system as an indirect way of creating racism to ban foreigners from entering the store. Now, here is the official website of the Gundam Base Tokyo, and this explains that, yeah, to get into the Tokyo store, to get into the Fukuoka store, you have to use this fucking lottery, and it's insane. Blah, 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 blah. Let me read through all this fucking bullshit. The website instructions for the lottery are 3 pages of absolute nightmare, but boiling it down simply, the only days it seems that you can get into the Gundam Base Tokyo without winning the lottery are Wednesday and Thursday, at least as it currently stands. Any other days of the week, you literally have to win the lottery or they won't let you get anywhere near the store. But again, that seems to be a bit catch-22 because it felt like on the day I was there was literally no one inside the store because they were being so strict about who could get in. I guess the people who won the lottery didn't actually show up, and adding insult to injury was the fact that the lottery also apparently has to be won up to 3 weeks in advance. Like, if you win a lottery and then it's 3 weeks later, are you going to remember that you needed to go to the Gundam store to buy your Gundams? Like, it's fucking insane. Like, it says that they might allow people in the store if someone cancels their lottery winnings, but it also says that you can't literally apply to enter the store on the same day that it is because of the advancedness of the system. And yeah, there's a lot of like crazy fucking rules here. Like, this is honestly like one of the most draconian and terrifying legal contracts I've ever seen in my life. And that's crazy because it's just to walk into a store. Anything else that I see is insane here. Every person is allowed 1 lottery ticket today. You cannot specify the time you want on the lottery ticket. If you in any way make an error in writing out your application to enter, you will be rejected from entry. Yada, yada, yada. The right to enter the store is only for winners. It says on the website you're not allowed to scalp your winning lottery tickets. You can technically bring 2 guests with you to enter per winning. However, children are not able to enter the lottery, so that's kind of funny. Let's see, what else? Only the winner of the lottery can purchase products. The 2 guests are not allowed to purchase anything. Personal information must be provided when applying for the lottery. Business hours will change in accordance with facility business hours. And if for any reason Diver City happens to be closed that day and you win, then obviously your lottery ticket is null and void. And yeah, as I previously stated, you're only allowed to buy 1 thing in the store per day. It does say that they might consider allowing people if that just enough lottery winners haven't shown up, but that seemed to be the case on the day I was there and they still weren't letting people in. And then it says here that even if you actually win the lottery, they still might not let you in the store if there's too many people in there at one time. So if you do win, you're expected to show up 10 minutes early because it will take some time to enter the store. And yeah, it says at the end of the contract that this was implemented mostly to deter scalpers from entering the Gundam store and reselling all their shit. God, what a fucking nightmare. All right, yeah, so is the Gundam Base Tokyo a tourist trap? The way it currently is, I don't know, man. This is even worse than a tourist trap. Like, this is just fully anti-immigrant, anti-scalper, AT field restricted, an anti-tourist trap kind of nightmare. Whereas most tourist traps I'm going to cover in this video series are just places out to steal your money. This one straight up hates you and makes you want to cry. And if you have little kids, it'll make them cry double because they apparently can't even register to get lottery tickets because children can't gamble, you know? Even though the Diver City Mall as a whole is worth visiting, the Gundam Base Tokyo is such a dangerous tourist trap that rejects all tourists that I'm not even sure what to say about it. I know some friends of mine have always wanted to go here, but seeing it in this bad a condition really shocked me to my core, and I'm not sure what to say. If you're trying to make a trip here, you have to proceed with absolute caution. You might need a Japanese friend to help you get in, but this fucking archaic lottery system here, like, this fucking sucks. This needs to be amended. This needs to be replaced with something more sensible that will stop overcrowding but still allow people to get in. I just fully have to discourage anyone not from Japan. If you really want to visit the Tokyo Gundam Base, you're going to have to think twice about it, guys, and I don't know. Like, it strongly worries me that I also wanted to someday check out the supposedly better Fukuoka Gundam Base that has all the rides and junk, and now I don't think I'm getting into that one either. Like, this has so fully soured me on the experience that I just left Diver City and I powered on to Tokyo, never to return. Alright, so after Odaiba, our next random place to visit, just because this trip was entirely being decided on geographic closeness, was the Taro Okamoto Museum House in Shibuya. Now, this might be news to a lot of people if you're not like deeply embedded in Japanese culture, but I consider Taro Okamoto the most important non-anime related artist in Japan in the past like 100 years, especially as he lived through the 20th century. And unlike most other ancient Japanese artists, we have a picture of him and we kind of have a sense of what he was like. The weird thing about Taro Okamoto, though, is that since his death in 1996, his public profile has been growing radically and exponentially year by year, which I guess is very typical of your average underappreciated artist like Van Gogh lived and died in poverty. And when an artist dies, people get really nuts and really weird about them because once you're dead, people can make up any sort of narrative about who you really were. Now, post-death Taro fever has seemingly reached an ironic fever pitch this year with the release of Taro Man, one thing I'm kind of curious about. I kind of thought I could go to the museum and watch Taro Man, but I was wrong. The museum is just too small, and apparently they're not really related to Taro Man. Taro Man is a series of short commercials by the NHK promoting the artwork and life of Taro Okamoto by reimagining his work as a surreal, super abstract, postmodernist take on Ultraman episodes. I'm not sure if the real Taro Okamoto would find this offensive, but he's dead, and once again, when you're dead, people can make up any sort of narrative about you. All in all, I'm actually pretty impressed by Taro Man, and I wanted to check it out. In a cool update I got from the museum, the shorts have apparently been compiled into a movie, and I look forward to someday seeking out the Taro Man movie and watching it and reviewing it on this channel. Anyway, aside from all that, so what's up with the Taro Museum House in Shibuya, and is that a tourist trap?
この番組はヨランのスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
Well, it kind of is and it kind of isn't, I guess, based on your general great expectations of what's here and what you want to get out of it. In general, the Taro Okamoto Museum is located in Shibuya, and it's across the street from the slightly more popular, maybe more interesting Nezu Museum of Ancient Japanese Statues, which makes them a pretty popular double date. Now, we did walk by the Nezu Museum, and since we were wandering around Tokyo, we checked it out. But we were also wandering around Tokyo with our full arsenal of very heavy American luggage, and we couldn't get inside because the luggage is banned out of terrorism concerns. So, meanwhile, we just went to the Okamoto Museum, and they allowed us to just bundle our luggage up in a big bag at the front door, and that was super cool of them. Now, I should mention that there are actually 2 Taro Okamoto museums in Tokyo, as well as the Tower of the Sun in Osaka, which I think also kind of counts as a museum. And it's definitely cooler than in the museums if I had to pick one to visit. I've already been to the Tower of the Sun, though. Anyway, the big Taro Museum in Kanagawa I've never been to, and the Taro Museum in Shibuya, it's apparently the smallest one. It's the easiest one to access, however, because it lies at the end of Shibuya's fashion district, in pretty much the dead center of Tokyo, where most people are likely to just be walking around and kind of bored because it's all clothing stores there. Anyway, alright, so should you visit the Taro Okamoto House Museum in Shibuya or not? I guess if you really care about the art, you should go there. The price is only 12,000 yen, less than your average Tokyo hamburger meal, and after going there, I think I maybe want to check out the Kanagawa Museum or go back to the Tower of the Sun. Maybe they're better places, but they're more remote and difficult to access. Like, I kind of want to go to the Kanagawa Museum, but the Kanagawa Museum is in the middle of nowhere, and I literally have no agenda going there. On a previous trip to Japan, I had also visited the Tower of the Sun, like in 2010, but at that time only the bottom floor was open, and as I learned today, the entire Tower of the Sun has recently been completely restored, and you can like go up to the top again. So I actually think that's cool, and I kind of want to do that someday. And yeah, I've never checked out the Taro Museum in Kanagawa either, but that also looks cool, so maybe next time that'll be on my agenda. Now, I will be transparent with you, though, and let you know that the Shibuya Taro Museum is tiny as hell. It literally only has 5 rooms, and only like 2 of them are interactives. So, like, on museum standards, like, I need to let you guys, like, know this museum is smaller than, like, your average Burger King. Like, do I really want a burger today? I don't know. I keep mentioning that. Anyway, the reason this museum is so small is that once upon a time, this museum was actually the literal house Taro Okamoto lived in. And yeah, this was his house in Tokyo, complete with his front yard. The rooms in the museum are the gift shop / entryway, which I believe used to be his kitchen. The bathroom is still a bathroom. That's kind of ironic. The coffee shop attached to the building, I think, used to be his garage. His living room is preserved as like an informational display living room where like there's like a cutout of him. His art studio and work office is completely preserved, but in a bizarrely tortuous way, where hundreds of his unsold paintings are like lining the shelves, never to be seen by the public, who literally came there and paid money to specifically see them. And lastly, there's the upstairs. I guess previously those were his bedrooms, but they've been converted into two very typical museum-y display rooms. The close one is all about the Tower of the Sun, how he made it, what's in there, and how it was restored recently, while the far one is more about Taro's general body of work and some other stuff he did that seemed cool. And lastly, outside of the museum and technically free to go to is Taro's statue garden, the central garden, which just doesn't seem to be as well maintained as the rest of the museum. It kind of needs a gardener, but otherwise it was a pretty cool place to hang out and see some stuff. And in reality, the garden was probably the most artistic place there. I will also praise the gift shop for probably being the #1 place to get Taro merchandise in Tokyo, if that's what you're into. So maybe you just go to the gift shop to buy some Taro merchandise and then you visit the museum afterwards as a second thought. One of my friends had a hyper-specific complaint that there wasn't enough merchandise of Okamoto's scary cat thing. I wonder if you have to buy tickets if you just want to buy something out of the gift shop, though. I don't know. In conclusion, I guess Taro Okamoto's house is not a tourist trap, but if you're visiting here, you should keep in mind that it is very small and there's not a lot of ton or interactive things to do here. And I was mistold by Google that the average person spends 3 hours here without getting bored, and that's complete bullshit. I feel like we literally saw everything in the museum, everything in the house. We read all the infographical panels in definitely less than half an hour because it's so small. I overall think the Taro Okamoto Museum house is worth visiting, but the tourist trap aspects seem to be that they are very downplaying and obfuscating of the fact that it is an extremely small place with technically only 4 rooms, and of those 4 rooms, only 2 of the rooms are actually like museum rooms that you can do things in. The others you just kind of look at through like a piece of glass. I guess they're kind of embarrassed of the fact that they weren't upfront about how small a place it is, and they didn't clearly tell me that there was more stuff in the Kanagawa Museum. So I guess in conclusion, this place is a light tourist trap, but I think it's still cool if you care about the arts. Alright, so after spending about half an hour at the Taro Museum, we faced our first day in the 110-degree Tokyo heat, and despite being only 4 hours into this first day and repeated warnings from me that this was a backpacking trip, all my friends had already overdid it with their luggage and their shopping for anime toys at Diver City, and we were already carrying way too much junk way too already. At this point, I ran into an existential crisis that somehow, in the 10 years I hadn't lived in Tokyo, I'd lost the ability to hail a cab. Despite waving my arm like a madman at one of them, it just would not stop at me. We took a hell hike down the road to a family mart to buy water, where thank God this cashier spoke English and reminded me that I was doing it wrong. To hail a cab in Tokyo, you have to put your hand up and arc your arm at a directly 90-degree angle, sort of like Lupin in this infamous anime cut. And with that sorted out, I was able to flag down a cab after that in 10 seconds. The cab quickly took us to our main hotel, the Hotel Gracery in Kabukicho, although I will mention that the cabbie tried to scam us. The taxi driver asked us if we would prefer to travel to Shinjuku from Shibuya using local roads or the highway. Since we were actually pretty close to our hotel where we were going, using the local roads cost us less than 2,000 yen. I initially, in my jet-lag state, however, said the highway, but then I saw the cab's GPS go crazy, as the dude intended to take us for a literal joyride and drive us basically around the entire perimeter of Tokyo to rip us off for all our money. I realized this on the spot and made him cancel the highway route and only use local roads. Not today, a-hole. Anyway, so then we checked into the Godzilla Hotel, aka Hotel Gracery, aka the Millennium Tower from the Yakuza game series. So this is another kind of complicated tourist trap. On the bad side, the Godzilla store is massively inferior to the one in Diver City that we had just saw. They had a few things I could buy, but nothing I really wanted to buy. It was like really strange Godzilla products. I want to say it was like Godzilla sandals and like Godzilla fans and very, very eclectic Japanese Godzilla things. The other problems with the Gracery is that apparently, according to some guy I ran into, it's completely impossible to get in there without a reservation. But lo and behold, we had one, so we got right in without a problem. And the last thing is that even though the cheapest room at the Gracery costs about 3 times the price of your average Tokyo hotel anywhere else in Japan, aside from all that, I can basically recommend the Gracery because it was a pretty fucking great hotel. Like, hell yeah, this is maybe the best, if not second best hotel I stayed in my entire trip. Alright, so here's what's good in here after I've listed off all the bad things. Just in terms of being a hotel, it has the largest bathrooms of any hotel I stayed in Japan. It's also the only hotel I stayed in with a full Western-style bathtub that you can lay down in, as opposed to most others having the typical scrunched-up Japanese bathtub. I don't get what's up with Japanese bathtubs, but they expect you to sit in a fetal position half the time if you need a bathtub. And on top of that, as a veteran Yakuza player forced to play all 8 games of Yakuza and memorize the streets of Kabukicho over and over again, being here was just satisfying as hell for me because I had a room on the 24th floor with a fantastic view of Tokyo, and apparently I just psychically remember all the streets around here because I played so many Yakuza games. At night, I was able to go around the tower, grab some sushi, and stop at the whiskey bar just like all in Yakuza. Alright, so now let's talk about Godzilla for a while.
この番組はヨランのスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
So yeah, the big tourist trap here is that this has themed itself the Godzilla Hotel, and aside from the unimpressive Godzilla gift shop, the Gracery also contains a semi-expensive Godzilla cafe with your typical expensive anime tie-in merchant food. And just so you know, you don't have to stay at the hotel to use the cafe. The cafe seems to be open to the public without checking into the hotel every day from 11 to 7. Although if you are checked into the hotel, it seems to be completely empty after 7 and open for a few hours after that. Some of the items at the cafe look kind of interesting, especially the edible Godzilla vs. Mothra diorama, but in general, the prices at the cafe were pretty extremely high compared to like everywhere else in Japan. I want to say the average food item at the cafe started at like $30, making this less of a Godzilla cafe and more of a high-class Godzilla restaurant in one of Tokyo's most expensive hotels. Speaking of dioramas, the hotel's lobby also contains a quick mock-up of what appears to be the set from Heisei Godzilla vs. Ghidorah and Rodan. That wasn't a movie, but they both were in movies. And then it contains a timeline of a pretty impressive and completely up-to-date list of all the movies. Lastly, at the corner and visible from the outside is a 1-1 statue of Heisei Godzilla's head, which for the guy asking if there was a 1-1 statue of Godzilla, does this count? I think this counts. But if this doesn't count, there's actually a much better Godzilla coming up in a future video that I'll cover a few videos later. And lastly, I wasn't able to check this out, but the Gracery also contains 2 absolutely asinine luxury Godzilla and Ghidorah suites for the richest of the rich, and these 2 suites are consistently booked out and unavailable for rent, but if you wanted to rent them, they seem to start at over $2,000 a night and need to be booked out precisely 2 months in advance because they're such hot commodities. But yeah, if you want to stay there, they're pretty funny, but we were poor, so that wasn't happening to us. The fact we got to stay at this hotel at all was kind of a miracle. Alright, so that was the Gracery, the Godzilla Hotel, but my friends and I were actually doing today on our Dub Godzilla Day was our next adventure, the Seibun Lake Amusement Park, home to Godzilla the Ride. Alright, so let's talk about that. After checking into the Gracery, we offloaded our heavy as shit luggage and went off to our next goal, the Godzilla the Ride, located in the Seibun Amusement Park. Commuting from the Gracery to the Seibun was pretty easy, as it has a direct train line from Shinjuku Station to Saitama. Also, massive shout out to the train for having ads to promote my favorite indie YouTube anime, Milky Subway. Hell yeah, Milky Subway. Makima is my girl. Anyway, I'll give you guys a heads up. Seibun is run by the Seibun Railroad conglomerate. And because they are a train conglomerate, they have this weird consequential train obsession in play here, and the park has been affected by that. Specifically, the only way into the park is riding into it, riding a special train. So to fully explain that, because this is very confusing to all of us, right outside the park is Tamako Station, which is the last normal train station beyond the park. Now, this is basically the end of the line for the Shinjuku to Seibu line, and geographically, you would think you could just walk out of Tamako Station and walk into the park, but you can't, because the park is surrounded by a giant barrier wall like it's Attack on Titan. At the end of Tamako Station, there is a bathroom. So what the deal is, and this is super confusing, you need to get off your train and then proceed north to the station's bathroom. And then next to the bathroom is a special transfer platform to take you to a super special secret bizarre train that will take you through a Disneyland Willy Wonka style tunnel directly into the theme park. Despite the train being aesthetically part of the theme park, it is still at the end of the day connected to a Tokyo subway terminal, and you have to transfer here through the Tokyo Metropolitan Subway System. It's still a thing that's open to the public, even though it's technically part of the theme park, and it's very, very abnormal. It's just this one special subway train that takes you into the theme park, and once we got on it, we were in the theme park. Alright, so let's talk about the Seibun Amusement Park. This is your typical old-school D-ranked Japanese amusement park that you might have seen once upon a time on a tokusatsu show, hurting for interesting locations. And if my information is accurate, apparently this was used as a location for 1 or 2 episodes of Kamen Rider Stronger in the 1970s, which I need to verify later, but it sounds logical and accurate to me, and this is probably the only time I'll ever bother talking about it. So yeah, this park is named and themed after the Sail Road Railroad conglomerate, which seems to have a massive chokehold on this area. They seem to be like the robber barons running this part of Saitama. My friends also had a really hard time remembering and pronouncing this name, so for the rest of the night, they would just call this place Saitama Land because it was slightly beyond the borders of metropolitan Tokyo in a very rural part of Saitama. So yeah, Saitama Land, a massively old amusement park in Tokyo dating back to Japan's recovery period, the early 1950s. I would say from an American perspective, the park I can most compare this to is it's like Dorney Park in Pennsylvania. It's this big, ancient old theme park in the middle of nowhere that's entirely propped up by its attachment to its attachment water park. And since it's in a landlocked area where there's literally no alternative to swim, cool down, and relax, that's how it stays in business, even though it's otherwise super antiquated. Seibun Land has a gigantic wave pool, a couple of water slides, and if this here is a lazy river, then I think they might have one of the biggest lazy rivers I've ever seen in the entire world. I unfortunately got there after the water park was closed, so I can't verify any of this. And I was too busy reviewing anime tourist traps on this trip to fully enjoy the world's largest lazy river, but that might be something they have. Anyway, in a nice cool twist, even though the water park closes, I want to say about 1 or 3 p.m. on most days for some stupid reason, after the water park closes, they lower the cost of entry to the park from 5,000 yen to 3,000 yen. So actually coming at night is kind of a good thing because, quite frankly, there isn't that much to do here. And besides, I had a pretty packed day with also going to Diver City and the Okamoto Museum and all that other shit. Now, I will say that from its initial 1950s form, Seibun Amusement Park is really not worth your time or mine, but I think a lot of people had written off this park recently as a park that had just failed dramatically to keep up with the times and was now something of a living antique. In 2020, however, the park was reimagined and restored in what I think is one of the most ballsy theme park reimaginings I've ever seen. And the equivalent to that one friend whose hair is falling out and one day he says, fuck it, I'm just going to shave my head and be an Ubermensch edgelord, Saitama Land went from being an old, decrepit, badly maintained theme park from the 50s to a shiny new theme park literally themed all around the 1950s. A park that basically redesigned itself to lean hard into its weaknesses and into its ancient crumbling aesthetic. And on top of that, they added 2 very new expensive items. The first new item is the new park entry gate, a brand new shopping building designed in the slightly rundown style of an old 1950s shopping arcade. But despite all that, this is new. It's full of gift shops and restaurants that really push melon soda as their number one thing, and it leans into the when you're here, it's 1950s Japan kind of attitude. And for better or worse, in kind of the same way the 2000 Tetsujin 28 reboot set itself in the 1950s and not the year 2000s, ironically inversing the 1950s anime being set in the year 2000s, this theme park kind of does the same thing. The other thing is that the 1950s arcade district is kind of itself an interactive experience in show and ride, but it's this weird altered reality experience thing. If you guys like Broadway shows, the arcade works very similar to the Broadway musical Tony and Tina's Wedding. If you've never seen this, it's a dinner theater type show where you get invited to like a fake Italian wedding. And while you're there trying to eat dinner, the wedding goes through a series of bizarre musical moments, wacky confrontations play out. And what I realized upon going to this show is the show is sort of like an altered reality sort of game sort of thing. And gameplay-wise, it plays exactly like the video game Zelda Majora's Mask, because every day the NPC actors have a script of actions they're supposed to play out at hyper-specific, on-the-dot precise times. And this all leads to a really weird organic dinner party experience where a couple of things are kooky and off the hook. But one by one, things happen that lead to the events of the night. And one thing that really struck out for me was when I went to it, at one point, I had to use the show's bathroom, and when I went to the bathroom, there were specifically scenes playing out in the bathroom by the NPC actors who, like, for example, would come in the bathroom and do fake drugs, and this would explain why later in the show they would act berserk and crazy because they were on drugs that were not real. But it was a profound moment for me because I would always reflect on that moment that if I had not gone to the bathroom at that specific time, I would not know why those actors were suddenly going crazy because all the setup for that plot line was only in the bathroom. And 90% of the audience did not go to the bathroom with me and was in the dark about that. Anyway, back to Saitama Land. So yeah, same thing, different continent. The shopping arcade is doing that same thing where the actors are playing out a bunch of various on-the-dot subplots. And since it was Japan, people were more on top of the NPC actors and what was going on, and were more straight up stalking and following the actors to see their antics and see their daily schedules play out. The number one actor that most people were apparently choosing to stalk and follow around was this waitress girl. The waitress girl has a whole Dusk Till Dawn storyline where she lives her life through a Hollywood kind of musical, an inspired storyline where she's a beaten down, run down waitress with no hope for advancement in her life. But one fine spring day, and it has to be in spring for some reason, she realizes something about herself and suddenly becomes great at everything. On top of that, the waitress has several ridiculous over-the-top musical numbers where as she's realizing to be her true self or whatever, she literally causes traffic gridlock as the numerous other NPCs in the shopping arcade dance around her and exist with like strange vehicles fulfilling her strange musical choreography. And for me, a casual tourist just trying to reach the Godzilla ride, this was almost a nightmare. It was extremely hard to navigate around her massively large musical number. Here's a picture I took of me literally struggling through back alleys just to get around the crowd and the extras promoting her musical numbers. According to the park information, besides her, there were also side stories about a cop, a robber, and a fishmonger, but I didn't see all of them. The only ones I saw were the waitress with her massive musical happening, and I honestly think that's probably the best one because everyone was having a good time, being totally obsessed with her, and kind of into it. All right, enough about that. The main reason I was here was to go on Godzilla the Ride. Let's talk about that. Is Saitama Land a tourist trap? I would say no. It's a pretty good deal just to go there for Godzilla the Ride and pay $30. And then if you get anything out of the 1950s town, the Waitress musical, or this ancient 1950s amusement park, then that's all gravy after the fact. So yeah, while Saitama Land is mostly just a bunch of old 1950s kiddie rides that are barely still running, Godzilla the Ride is actually a crazy experience, rivaling the finest and most expensive rides at Universal Studios and Disneyland. It's actually so crazy that this ride is even here. It's like seeing this rundown, terrible amusement park on the boardwalk just having randomly like the pristine Back to the Future ride from Universal Studios in the center of it. The Godzilla ride also sits just slightly outside the park's normal like thoroughfare in a giant building stylized after a 1950s Japanese movie theater on top of a giant mountain. I believe the ride is actually inside the mountain and the mountain is a giant facade. But yeah, the Godzilla ride is definitely the park's trump card and seemingly represents a path forward for the park to invest in more high quality, super complicated experiences and rides. Since I visited a few theme parks in Japan on this trip, I noticed that a large number of theme parks are totally butthurt and jealous about the existence of Tokyo Disneyland and Universal Studios Japan. And this was the only park that seemed like it was even trying to reach their level at all, even just for one single ride. And I want to say that one single ride made the difference. So let's talk about what Godzilla the Ride is and why it's so effing cool. I would say Godzilla the Ride is like a 4D simulator experience, which isn't that unusual, but it does have some unusual quirks in that it's kind of like an IMAX roller coaster. Like what happens here is you basically sit in a roller coaster car that barely moves. It just goes like, I want to say 6 feet forward and then shakes back and forth. But the roller coaster car is suspended inside the middle of a massive IMAX planetarium dome. Like the IMAX Planetarium Dome is basically your typical IMAX Planetarium Dome. You might have seen one of these if you've ever been to a top quality IMAX theater, like, I don't know, the one at the Liberty Science Theater. But this is the level that very few IMAX theaters reach, where it actually goes in like a massive geodesic dome. And because you're suspended in the middle of this dome in a roller coaster car, the dome actually spits out 180 degrees in front of you and below you instead of above you, which is actually a kind of ingenious move, and I guess that's why it's inside of a mountain. Now from here you watch a Godzilla movie, and the roller coaster car moves around the IMAX dome in a pretty smooth motion. Every once in a while, water and fire will shoot at people. So now I'll give you the quick history of the Godzilla ride, because even though I was there for the brand new opening of the Takashi Yamazaki Godzilla -1 version, the ride itself has been the same ride for the past 5 years. The big thing that they've done to keep the ride relevant is that they've changed the movie out on the ride 3 times. So when the ride was originally constructed, it apparently had version 1 of Godzilla the Ride called the Great Kaiju Dominance Battle, where a unique version of Godzilla that was seemingly an evolutionary step between Millennium Godzilla and -1 Godzilla would fight his archenemy King Ghidorah. Now eventually, due to filling attendance, this movie was switched out for Ultraman the Ride, which again, same ride, but now the story on the movie consisted of Ultraman fighting his archenemy Zeton in the final battle to the death from the last episode of Ultraman, which felt pretty on par with the park's otherwise 1950s aesthetic vibe. Then sometimes after this, they mixed the Godzilla ride and the Ultraman ride together in a weird switch-out schedule where I want to say every day the Ultraman ride would play from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Then from 3 p.m. when the park closes the water park and gets a little cheaper, they'd switch out the Ultraman ride for the old Godzilla ride, which would play from 3 to 8 until the park closes. Now, finally, in this August, the Godzilla ride just wasn't doing the numbers anymore, so they fully retired the original Godzilla the Ride movie and replaced it with Godzilla -1 versus Mechagodzilla the Great Clash, which is the ride I saw on the day I was there. Alright, so how was Godzilla the Ride? Godzilla the Ride was fucking awesome. It's the best ride in the park. It entirely justifies visiting Saitama Land because you wait in an air-conditioned theater. The line wasn't that bad at all because Seibun as a whole isn't that popular for Japanese people, and it's so out of the way that most people don't want to go there. There was a briefing room where this actor comes out in like this red military uniform and shows us the toy Mechagodzilla and says, I don't know, our mission was to like drive a boat over to Godzilla and distract him so Mechagodzilla could kill them. And with that done, we got into the roller coaster car and off we went. Now the movie is super, super cool. Like it really gave the impression that we were in a boat in Tokyo Bay flying around fighting Godzilla. Since I had just flown into Haneda and just gone to Odaiba, I recognized like all these locations and they looked completely realistic. Godzilla fried the other ship observing him, then Mechagodzilla came out, and the two of them had this massive like battle to the death. Godzilla ended up totally clowning Mechagodzilla. That was actually kind of crappy, but Mechagodzilla still got some good hits in. Mechagodzilla did enough damage to Godzilla that he burned his skin off and turned -1 Godzilla into this new form that kind of resembled Burning Godzilla from Godzilla vs. Destroya, except he looked more bloodier and badass, and it was so fucking hardcore. Anyway, Burning Godzilla kills Mechagodzilla and then kind of accepts defeat and leaves and goes off to sleep in his fucking bed at the bottom of the ocean. Super fucking cool. Now, after Godzilla the Ride, that was kind of it for this place. We walked around Saitama Land for another hour or two. We did like the shooting games. We rode like the old 1950s ride. We did get dinner there. I will say the dinner was a little bit overpriced, but I will praise that even though it was overpriced, it was freaky fast. Like maybe the fastest fast food restaurant I'd ever seen in the world, because we ordered like a very large dinner and the dinner instantly appeared before us. The rest of the park was otherwise super subpar, and we had a long day behind us and ahead of us, so we hurried home and back to the Gracery and went to bed after that. At the end of the night, I went out in Kabukicho one last time, and I saw this weird bucket-headed robot girl singing old anime songs in Kabukicho, and I was so happy I'm staying at the Gracery because it's just a fucking, like, wild place to stay. Alright, so that was my Godzilla experience. Stay tuned. Next time, I'm going to the world's largest machine. Okay, so hey, welcome to day 2 of my Japan trip. Yes, we're 5 videos in and I'm only on day 2. So welcome back to my anime tourist trap trip of Japan. If you're unfamiliar with me, my name is Mutant Buster Green. Previously, I was in the anime The Mutant Busters. Have you all seen the first episode yet? Because episode 2 is coming out soon. But yeah, I made an anime, and as a result of that, I have Japanese friends who I'm totally cool with because they worked on my anime with me. Now, one of my perks of this was I got to visit the world's largest machine, the Tokyo Metropolitan Anti-Tsunami Flood Pump, aka the Ryukukan for short, which is a pun because it relatively means the space under the river, but it's spelled with a random mysterious Q, which the Japanese people consider mysterious. Anyway, I had a vague understanding about it due to it being frequently used as a filming location in several Kamen Rider series in Ultraman. I think it was a Shocker base in Kamen Rider Decade. So to explain this thing for starters, have you ever wondered why Japan, a country that frequently suffers from earthquakes, flash floods, and tsunamis almost every year, somehow has never had one hit its urban megalopolis of Tokyo? Well, the reason for that is actually this thing, the Ryukukan. As geographically speaking, Tokyo is a bay, a basin, a river basin, and logically, every river surrounding Tokyo would just be constantly dumping water into it, and that would eventually cause it to flood, right? Well, the main reason it doesn't is the Ryukukan, the world's largest machine, the world's largest water collector, the world's largest water pump. If you've ever admired a pool pump for keeping a pool clean, this is a massive machine that spans relatively the entire width of Saitama Prefecture. I guess to put that into perspective, Saitama and Connecticut are about the same size, so just consider that This is a machine the size of the fucking state of Connecticut that collects floodwater from every river in Saitama that could damage Tokyo and pumps it over here to the backwoods of nowhere. Now, foreigners are not allowed to buy tickets to this thing, so that means me going here was super specific and special, but since I had my crew of my anime living nearby, they bought me a ticket just for me and I gave them back the money. So, sorry if you're enjoying this video and you think this looks like a super cool place to visit. You probably won't be able to come here unless, like me, you're able to bribe some Japanese citizens to get you tickets. But even then, that's just the first step in the very long battle to come here, because as far as I understand, the reason foreigners are not allowed to buy tickets comes down to about 3 reasons. 2 of them are goofy, 1 of them is very serious. The reason number 3 is that the tour was conducted in Japanese, but I speak Japanese, so screw that. They're also pretty reasonable about using English subtitles for most of what they're saying, so it's pretty obvious what's going on. Maybe the main reason they don't allow foreigners to come here is because of YouTube villains and otherwise foreign bad actors who just don't listen to Japanese tour guides. Technically, this place is the world's largest machine, and if you don't listen to a tour guide who only speaks Japanese and you make a wrong turn at Albuquerque, you're going to fall 2 miles down a hell shaft to the center of the earth, and then get sucked into a highly pressurized water tube and shot out the other end the size of a penny. It's one of the worst possible deaths I can imagine, and yeah, just imagine being compressed to the size of a penny instantly. It happens to people sometimes. It's a bad way to die. They also apparently don't allow anyone the age of 18 to visit for the same reason. But I want to say the number 1 reason they don't allow foreigners to buy tickets for this thing is just the sheer difficulty of accessing this stupid place. See, the pump lies in a pretty terrible part of Saitama, and I was warned about this ahead of time, but the pump is in this town called Kusakabe. And the town has your typical Japanese problem of suburban die-off. Specifically, to reach the pump, you have to take this train from Shinjuku to Minami Sakurai Station in Kusakabe. And we did all that. But then we discovered that the town of Minami Sakurai is basically a completely dead ghost town with a hostile and aging senior population who really doesn't want anyone coming there. And because of its ghost town status, you can't really take a taxi there because there's just no people around to support a taxi or a taxi economy. So once you get off your train, you're fucked. You have no choice but to make a grueling 30-minute walk from the train station to the Ryukyukan, which sucked for us because even though we got off the train at about 8 a.m. in the morning, it was still 110 every fucking day this week in Tokyo. It was already peaking 90 as early as 6 a.m. as soon as the sun walked out. And yeah, it was a really strange vibes town. It was very like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Not only was the town dead, but the people who lived in the town seemed very unfriendly and hostile. So we ended up there and we ended up just walking to the pump. And because we had to get there in time for our hyper-specific reservation, when we had walked about halfway through the town, I started having flashbacks and muscle memories of when I used to live in Saitama and how much of an unbearable hellhole it was back in the day. And so I immediately started hitchhiking again. And somehow I immediately flagged down a car with a bored woman inside who was, I guess, delivering supplies to the old people. And she managed to take our entire party to the Ryukyukan.
この番組はヨランのスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
Alright, so how was the world's largest machine? It was kind of incredible. The tour consisted of 3 main phases: the briefing phase, the engine room phase, and finally the underground shrine, the G-cans, where the water is stored and dispersed after being sucked up from all around Tokyo. Overall, the tour took about 2 hours. The briefing room was totally the most boring part because it was a lot of being lectured in Japanese, and they said the same thing kind of over and over again, like water goes in, water goes out, booyah. We looked at this video of the water coming in, and we looked at a plastic model of the water coming in, and finally we looked at the control center, which was completely empty because the machine wasn't being used today. The engine room was also pretty boring and had the distinct mildew smell of your grandma's old basement, although my friends were impressed by the number of machines in the engine room that seemed to be still functioning from the 1970s. Then finally went into the shrine, and that was the main reason we were there, and that was both cool and refreshing since it was so far underground that it was great to get out of the fucking mess and heat that Japan was wrapped in just to this place that was so icy cold and cool. And it was so weird that it was so large that there were actually clouds moving around the room, which was kind of crazy. My biggest annoyance on the trip was, though, that we ultimately had no agency about where we could go on the tour and in the rooms. We had very limited amounts of movements and freedom from room to room, and I get that they're trying to protect us from falling into one of the most brutal heavy metal deaths you could imagine, but it still would have been nice to like walk around the loom a little bit more and stare into the absolute death shaft, or at least be able to like go to one end of the room from the other, because it is like one of the largest like rooms in the world, and they just don't allow people to walk around because I guess they don't want people sneaking off or getting lost or anything. And because the room is so large, I guess like technically after like so far a distance, no one can hear you. And there is this whole like constant technical danger that it is actually the world's largest machine, and it is being actively used at any given second. So I guess there's plenty of ways that someone could get lost there or like locked into like a significantly life endangering place. Anyway, after that, there was this mini game where you use an AR iPhone app to show how the room looks as it floods with water. And it does like indicate that it could completely flood with water in like seconds. I give some credit to the app as being designed to work perfectly in this one room and nowhere else in the entire world. Some kids were using the app to simulate them drowning to death in the water, which was kind of the best joke I saw all day. All right, so all in all, is the Ryukukan a tourist trap? Is it worth visiting? Well, I personally thought it was cool. I enjoyed the mini adventure I was having going there, and I think it was a really awesome place. The price was pretty cheap, only $25 a person, and seeing the scale of the G-Can's room was entirely worth it. I cannot say this is a tourist trap because it actively discourages foreign tourists due to its danger level and the overall difficulty of traveling there. So in the end, I'd classify it less of as tourist trap and more of just a tourist challenge. The worst part was just definitely getting there and the lack of freedom you have when you're actually there. And the fact the tour as a whole was maybe longer than I would have liked. I think it probably could have like been an hour shorter and I would have had the same experience. I do appreciate them making a show of it and like going into detail about like each part of the machine. I'm overall glad I went, and now that I went, I probably will never go back unless in some like miracle I get to direct an episode of Kamen Rider. But I'm glad I saw it once for the sake of seeing it. It's like seeing the Eiffel Tower. It's cool to see it once and then you never need to see it again. When the trip was over, I asked the nice family that had been on the tour with us to give us a ride back to the station, and that was the end of that craziness. We left Saitama. I hope I never go back to Saitama again. Maybe I won't. All right, next time I'm going to drive a giant robot. All right, so if you're caught up on this video series, in the last episode, I went to the world's largest flood pump, which was purchased for me via my anime crew helping me out and buying me tickets. So after the fact, I wanted to help out the anime crew, so I went back to Tokyo and bought them all steak dinners. Mune Busters 2, hopefully coming in 2026. Ugh, I need to work on Mune Busters 2 when I have a chance. Anyway, I wanted to do something nice and fun for the anime crew, so we went after dinner to this nice Patlabor experience in Tokyo, which maybe some other YouTubers have already done already, but hey, it's Patlabor, and that's pretty cool. So yet again, I have to ask, is the Patlabor experience a tourist trap?
この番組はヨランのスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
Oh god, yes. Maximum level tourist trap. Very trap, very hot trap. And overall, the experience kinda sucked. Although I gotta say, if they were a little bit more upfront about what they were doing, I would lessen their trap level. Anyway, it was weird. So we took a cab down to the warehouse district in the middle of Tokyo between like Akihabara and the Skytree to deal with the Patlabor experience. Now, I've seen a lot of other Tokyo influencers on YouTube and Insta being like, oh, hey, I got to pilot this super crazy giant robot. Look at this. It's Optimus Prime. You got to try it. And I was totally curious. And I was like down in the reeds with like a few other Japanese robot aficionados who seemed really positive about this and indicated that the 1-1 Ingram upper torso was constructed with technology that is shared by some of the engineers who made the Yokohama Gundam and the recent Arcax Armored Trooper prototype unit. So, okay. The one thing that massively annoyed about this experience, the number one thing wrong with it was just the lack of transparency about exactly what it was and exactly how it plays out. So I knew that just to walk in the door, you pay $25 to open the door and look at the Ingram. Ooh, the Ingram. And yeah, I knew that was coming. Then I also knew that you have to pay another $10 to sit down in the Ingram and I guess get your photo taken in it, which I did, and that was another whole dramatic thing. But what completely bummed me out after the fact, and apparently gave me sticker shock, was that to fully control the Ingram and have 100% like motion and freedom and make it do things, there's a final surprise charge of $120. And I'm like, what? For real? I thought if I paid $10, you would let me move the robot. But no, it's $120 after the $10, which is just what you pay to sit down in. Wait, is there like a reality where I don't pay to sit down and I have to control it standing up? Anyway, this wasn't advertised, so it pissed me off. I would believe that if I just paid $10 to sit in the Ingram would move. And if they hadn't hidden that control activation fee and told me up front it was $120, I might have thought twice and I might have paid it. But because they sprung it on me last second, I was like, hell no. Like, this robot won't move unless you give us $120. That totally ruined the experience for me. I also kind of ruined over the course of the trip that I don't mind spending money if it's something important, if I think it's something fun, but I hate surprise fees because if I'm not mentally prepared to spend money, then I won't. Also, when I got into the cockpit later, the actual cockpit controls seemed kind of totally fake, so I wonder if maybe the real robot is controlled with like a PS5 controller somewhere else or something. The mechanic guy seemed to indicate that he had some sort of like power glove motion controller, so it's possible that that's how it's controlled, or maybe that was like a joke or some fictional joystick or some like bullshit from the anime. Okay, one important thing I think I have to mention about the anime Patlabor, in case you've never seen it. The Patlabor that I like is less about robots who are cops and more about people living in Tokyo having to deal with their normal lives, except there's giant robots around them. And this experience weirdly recreated that very specifically through a cast of quirky characters running the robot factory and the experience. Okay, so trying to explain the beats of this experience were weird. You go into this warehouse and there's 3 people inside it. And what's really bizarre about this experience is that even now I'm confused if these people were like actors LARPing as these Patlabor roles or if they were real people working a 9-to-5 job in this Tokyo Patlabor experience factory place, because they did weird shit where they would like break the 4th wall and they were like simultaneously existing in both the real life of like the world of the Patlabor anime, and it was honestly so confusing. Like one of the most confusing experiences I've ever had in my life, because they would just flip back and forth between this is an anime, this is Neo Tokyo, between this is completely real, this is a giant robot, this is Tokyo 2025, it sure is hot today. Like they were acting, but doing such a bad job of the acting that it was unnerving, almost dizzying. Like, if I had to compare it to anything, like, remember the old Colbert Report show and the character Stephen Colbert would portray on that show where he would, like, lie through his teeth, but every once in a while he would, like, ask a real question about something he was concerned about to, like, throw people off? Like, imagine having a conversation with that guy, like, he was constantly lying, but at the same time you knew he was lying and you also couldn't make him stop lying. That's basically the Patlabor experience. Everyone's constantly lying to you and you have no ability to make them stop. Like, the cast of characters here at the Patlabor experience, to start with, there was Cash Register Girl. Cash Register Girl was the least interesting character. She was not social at all, and I'm very disappointed that in other people's YouTube videos, Cash Register Girl was a cosplayer, but ours was just like a fancy businesswoman. The next most interesting dude was the Mechanic, a character lightly based on Patlabor comedy relief character Mechanic Shigeo Shiba, except in this case, this was a real dude who was also a Ukrainian refugee and seemed to speak English as his first language and was so at Japanese. He was also too nerdy and too skinny to fight in the Ukraine war, so he was here in Tokyo repairing this giant robot. But once again, the line on this experience was so blurred between reality and fiction that I was genuinely confused if this guy was a real robot mechanic working in Tokyo or just an actor playing one. But he did seem to know his shit about how the robot worked and had the parts for it and stuff, and seemed like an honest-to-God draft actor from Ukraine, so again, I have no idea where the real guy starts and where the character starts. And finally, the host was just this punk kid from Tokyo. The host was once again the most confusing part of the experience because I had to deal with him the most, and I could tell he was acting, but he was acting badly, and he would also not be normal with me because the experience was real but surreal, and it was just disorienting. I didn't hate this dude, but he was such a bad actor that I wish he wasn't acting at all, because he was just trying to give like this veneer of mystery and importance to the situation, but he was overall very bad at it, and he just came off like this confused kid because he was just blurring the line between fact and fiction to the point where both he and I didn't know what was real anymore. Anyway, so the robot turned on, that was cool. And between the sticker shock of, oh fuck, I can't pay $120 to turn this robot on, and the general cringe factor of the confusing LARPing actors, I just did not have a great time here. Anyway, I paid my $10 to enter the robot, and I immediately ended up cutting a huge slash through my leg. So what happened here was that to enter the robot, you had to use these homemade stairs that the guys made, and yeah, somehow I tripped on the stairs, and it cut straight through my leg like a steak knife. Blood everywhere, great start to the experience. Then at the top of the ladder, to enter the Patlabor, you apparently have to crawl into it backwards, which was kind of an unusual move. So yeah, once you get your legs into it, then it's really just like putting on a pair of pants. And I think I'll remember that because that was maybe the best part of the experience. Just putting on my not compensating for anything giant robot pants, which is kind of ironic since this particular Patlabor doesn't happen to have legs. Anyway, that was it. That was all I did. That kind of sucked. They wouldn't even close the cockpit for me just so I could have the full experience of being trapped in the cockpit and seeing what it looked like with the door closed. They did have some mega expensive Patlabor merchandise for sale, and that was great and all, but I was already broke from walking in the door, and they had a few vintage props left over from the now 10-year-old Patlabor live-action movie, and that was kind of all that. The experience, definitely a total tourist trap. Maybe the most tourist trap thing I did on this entire trip. I did not have a great time here. I guess I can still recommend it if you're a hardcore giant robot aficionado and you want to try driving a Patlabor, but be prepared to pay at least $155 if you want the real experience, and that's a lot of money in my book. If they had just been honest about that, maybe I would have given them a better review, but because they sprung it on me, it was very, very, very rage-inducing. But if I'm being honest, the weird characters running the event having crazy synergy with the weird characters from the Patlabor anime maybe was the best part. Maybe that was the silver lining here. But even then, that still doesn't make up for the sticker shock of turning on the robot being $120, or the fact that somehow I lost a lot of my blood in here. Alright, skipping ahead after that, after this was all over, I took the Moonbusters anime crew to Nakano Broadway, where I bought them all ice cream, and we looked at old 1990s Tenchi Muyo merchandise, and I discovered an honest-to-God discarded tokusatsu prop, and that was overall pretty fun. The Nakano Broadway was recommended to me from the game Digimon Cyber Sleuth. That was a good fucking recommendation from that Digimon game. Anyway, next time on this video series, I'm going to the 2025 World's Fair, and that's a very complicated story. When I was in 5th grade, my favorite show was The Simpsons. I have no idea why, it's just what happened that year. Episode 20 of Season 7 is called Bart on the Road, and it has a pretty unhinged plot where Bart and his friends get a fake ID, some money, and then use it to rent a car, but they aren't sure where to go with it. Milhouse, of all people, then proposes that the absolute best place they could go in the world would be the World's Fair. And the last time America had a World's Fair was in Tennessee in 1982. So they all drive to Tennessee, but bad news because they're kids and they're idiots. They fail to reach the World's Fair because the World's Fair ended in 1982. The only thing left is the aging and decrepit Sun Sphere, which does stand to this day in real life in the site in Tennessee. The World's Fair is a complete disaster to them, taken over by Tennessee hillbillies selling wigs. At the end of the episode, Milhouse, almost struggling to comprehend what is going on, screams, "But there's gotta be another World's Fair coming soon. Right? Right?" Well, I guess I thought to myself, yeah, Milhouse, there's gotta be. The irony being that for some reason, some inexplicable turn, the United States gave up on the World's Fair after that. Years before I was born, that was the last World's Fair America ever had, 1982, Tennessee. And nowadays it seems like we're giving up on the rest of the world too, so maybe that was just our first step towards hell. There was apparently an unofficial mini World's Fair in Ohio in 1992, but no one counts that, and while the World's Fair used to be a yearly event in the 80s up until the 90s, it's been happening less frequently. The 2000s had some cities and countries cancel it, so it switched to sort of a biannual run. The 2010s only did it 5 times, and now in the 2020s, the World's Fair is only occurring 3 times. The first World Fair of this decade was Dubai 2021, and now here we have Osaka 2025, and the final one will be Serbia in 2027. Maybe the next decade will have more, who the hell knows. But I really wanted to check out the World's Fair, because since it's been a thing that Americans don't do anymore, I wanted to check it out. I wanted to see the things. And more than that, I want to see what's up with all these weird fucking things. See, even though we don't do the World's Fair anymore, there's all these like remnants behind of when we used to do it. Like, there's this giant globe in Queens, which I guess is kind of weird, but not that weird. I suppose other parks might have a giant globe. But on top of that, there's this weird leftovery, mushroomy, umbrella-like structure that's been closed to the public all my entire life. But then in GTA 4, you could drive a car into it, and then I was like, what exactly is that thing? Anyway, another story is that in 2010, when I moved to Japan, one day I went to Osaka, and randomly wandering through Osaka, I eventually wandered into the Tower of the Sun. The Tower of the Sun is this mysterious object created by dead Japanese artist Taro Okamoto. I was in his house a few days ago. I just want to put into context the strangeness of wandering through a forest in Japan, and suddenly out of nowhere is this utterly baffling, giant, purposeless alien device standing in front of me. It was like living through the movie Prometheus before the movie Prometheus was even a movie. It's an Osaka autumn day. The park is empty, but in the middle of it, in the middle of this vast field of grass, is this gargantuan structure that makes zero sense. It kind of looks like a chicken. It has a front side and a back side. The front side looks like an evil baby surrounded by red lightning, and on the back side is a massive satanic symbol looking like an evil black star, like the one that had just killed David Bowie. It's hard to put into words, but discovering this randomly, wandering through Japan, left me feeling so incredibly uneasy. This genuine feeling of, what the fuck is this thing? Why is it here? Why is it so big? And most importantly, why does no one give a shit about this? Why am I the first person to discover this thing? Why doesn't anyone talk about it? So the Tower of the Sun is this inexplicable thing that makes no sense to anyone out of context, but like the garbage ruins in Queens and the Tennessee Wig Sphere in The Simpsons, it's all that remains of another World's Fair, the Osaka World's Fair that hit Japan in 1975. And it's gone down in Japanese history as the so-called tombstone of the 20th century, a place where the future that was promised to the baby boomer generation, the people who lived through this event, were unable to gather together as a society and seize it. This sentiment kind of exists in America. There's something that just went severely wrong with the world, severely wrong with humanity, and it all went wrong in the last quarter of the 20th century. This similar sort of vibe can be felt for certain pieces of media like Star Trek and the more cynical lookbacks to the 60s era like, I don't know, the Venture Brothers or the recent Fantastic Four movies. More than anything, something that really puts the finger on it is Naoki Urasawa's acclaimed graphic novel 20th Century Boys, which grapples directly with both this feeling of inadequacy and failure that the boomer generation doesn't live in starships on the moon right now, and this constant unnerving feeling that the World's Fair was this thing that made people get together and create these incredible feats of human engineering, when while some of them were left behind like the Eiffel Tower and the Space Needle to become beloved national landmarks, others like the Queen's Park and the Tower of the Sun lay in this bizarre fugue state where they're too important to be destroyed but too unimportant to remain relevant to society, remaining as these giant ghosts, these monoliths to a better world that never came. The 1975 Osaka's World Fair made so many promises that Japan just couldn't keep. And when those promises weren't fulfilled fast enough for it all, the boomer generation that lived through this was left with a feeling that haunts them to this day. Failure. Only failure. In 2017, for the 50th anniversary of Osaka Expo, Osaka made one last attempt to get back the World's Fair and do it all over again. They were approved with the only counteroffer coming from the town of Yekaterinburg, Russia. And on another story, in 2011, I moved to Japan and also suffered great personal failure. And aside from that, there's also a Gundam Pavilion here, and I guess I need to review that for my YouTube channel. For all those reasons I've just listed, I decided to attend the Osaka World's Fair 2025.
この番組はヨランのスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
Alright, so after checking up on my anime crew and the sad tourist trap Pat Labor experience and the thrills of the Nakano Broadway with all their vintage Tenshin Muyo merchandise, we spent Saturday night in one of the most expensive hotels in Japan, the Gracery, and we spent Sunday night in one of the most poorest places you can stay, across the street at a low-quality vet kind of interesting onsen underneath the former Kabukicho Sega arcade. Once again, personal shout out to Kazuma Kiryu for protecting my family and reminding me where all the good shit is in Kabukicho. Anyway, after that, we got to the bus station and slept on a sleeping bus headed to Osaka. Now, I've used the sleeping buses maybe 3 times in the past. They're pretty common to get around in Japan and not waste a night traveling, but something about the sleeping bus we used this night, it totally sucked. It was like the worst one ever. I couldn't sleep on it at all. The seats were too small and uncomfortable, and I was constantly being annoyed and distracted by crap going on in the world. After we stopped at a rest stop in Shizuoka to use the bathroom, I was awake the whole night. Eventually, we arrived at Osaka Station and took a quick cab to our hotel to drop off our luggage, and then we attempted to enter the 2025 World's Fair. Now, things immediately took a turn for the negative almost as soon as we entered the fair. While the fair had boasted about its semi-constant shuttle service from Osaka, I once again got slapped in the face upon my arrival with bullshit. Turns out it's not as simple as just getting on a bus and giving the bus driver money, even though there were literally hundreds of buses lined up here to take people into the fair. To enter the World's Fair, you apparently have to buy special tickets through a special proprietary app, and I think the tickets also need to be reserved, even though there are literally hundreds of buses just sitting there empty going back and forth. We got this brutal awakening alongside dozens of Japanese families also walking into the same tourist trap at the same time, and since I'm Japanese, I managed to find a particularly upset old man who was like, "Fuck all this shit, I'm just gonna take a cab." And we talked him into splitting his cab fare with our group, and so then we arrived at the World's Fair. But then things just went from bad to worse. Now I'm going to pause the video here and explain all the tragic mistakes we made weeks before this that made our day infinitely worse. So to boil down why the 2025 World's Fair was a disaster and how we ruined our day before we even stepped foot in the fair, once again, Japan over-relied on proprietary apps designed to make this event so confusing as possible. And like the Gundam-based Tokyo, which I complained before was ruined by lotteries, the World's Fair was also ruined by lotteries. So me and my friends are going through Japan as this cool nerd attack team, and although we're mostly doing this agenda that I created to see as many anime tourist traps as possible, we also have our own individual bank accounts, and we're separate people, and we live in different places and everything. Now, as a result of this, we all had separate accounts to get into the World's Fair, and none of our tickets were synced up together to do any events. Like, just imagine for a second if like Disneyland or Universal Studios had like a system where you could only go on rides if you booked them on an app 2 months in advance. That's basically what the World's Fair in Osaka has done. Most of the rides, even if there's no one in them, you have to have tickets 2 months in advance to even line up and go inside. So ironically, even though we actually did buy our tickets 2 months in advance, which on paper would have promised us 10 rides or pavilions or 10 lottery tickets to win them, issued in groups of 5 a month, we made another mistake. We didn't set our arrival date. We didn't set our arrival date until a few days before we arrived in Japan because we weren't sure what day we would be in Osaka on. And because we didn't set our arrival date, we were denied those 10 freebie tickets because you can only get them a day precisely a month before your arrival date. But since we didn't set the date, it was null and void because we weren't sure which day we were coming to the fair, and we weren't sure which day we wanted to go to Universal Studios instead. There were many, many crazy variables in play for this trip. And although the trip, I want to say overall went very well, because of all these crazy variables like commuting, airlines, hotels, and the general difficulty of traveling across Japan, we just didn't know which days we would exactly be doing what things we were doing. So even though we specifically bought the tickets 2 months in advance, as we were recommended to do to get the 10 freebie lottery tickets, we were still denied those because we didn't set our arrival date, and therefore we couldn't get any of the tickets redeemed, and we couldn't get into any pavilions. On top of that, the app to register for the lotteries is a nightmare of bad design. The app signs you out every 20 minutes, makes you log into a website, makes you put your password back in every 20 minutes because somehow it can't remember what it's doing after 20 minutes. And the single biggest mistake, I'm saying now in retrospect, was I should have just bought everyone's tickets together on my credit card and then hit everyone up for money, because it was almost impossible. No, it was impossible to synchronize the tickets from all these multiple people. And if they had just been bought together, I could have synchronized the tickets up, because what would happen is the stupid website in the app would kick us out every 20 minutes, so we could never get the tickets synchronized before the website would reset and kick us out. Literally trying to get tickets to anything was a fight against time, and finally, at the event, we had one final chance to bum rush the app and get our final chance tickets, but once again, the website would repeatedly crash until all the tickets were sold out, so we never had a fucking chance to do anything. This essentially ruined the event for us before we even stepped 1 foot in the park. And again, 110-degree Osaka heat, that wasn't fun either. So real quick before I even get into what actually happened, here's my FOMO of things I wanted to do at the expo, but I wasn't able to do a single damn thing. Number 7, I wanted to go to the Irish Pavilion. I have no idea what's inside there, but I'm Irish, so I thought that was cool. Number 6, there's this strange hallucinatory Ripple building. Now, I actually went up to this building, but I don't know what it was, and I tried to get inside. I just couldn't find the front door, but it was definitely a building, so I assume it had an inside. Number 5, China's Pavilion. That looked cool. Line was too long, couldn't get inside. And number 4, USA had a pavilion. I'm from the USA, that makes sense. Apparently our pavilion was based on the 1960s moon landing. Despite being an expo of the future, it's all about the past. Anyway, we didn't get over there and we couldn't find it, and I want to say it like blended into another building, like the Philippines building, so we kept missing it, but I am kind of fascinated that despite being an American, this was my first time hearing anything about this. Number 3 was apparently the pavilion for the country of Jordan, being a massive crowd pleaser with the world's largest sandbox. A lot of people said that was the best pavilion. Number 2 was Kawamori Shoji's pavilion, which apparently was some sort of complicated VR projection map of like chaotic animations with a lot of technical direction overseen by the people who worked on Macross Frontier. And of course, number 1, the main reason I was there was to see the stupid Gundam Pavilion, which apparently is the best ride in the park. A sick-ass ride where you fly a spaceship through a Gundam battle. Kakarot197 dropped a video where he went there and he actually got on the ride. I'm insanely jealous because it sounds like he was there on almost the same day I was there, but he succeeded where I was failed, so he's the better man. Go watch his video. He had a great time. I did not. Okay. So as far as the World's Fair goes, pretty badly, especially after we first arrived. The fair also, making things even worse, utilized this cashless credit card only system that put me at a massive disadvantage because I'm not from Japan. I don't have a Japanese credit card, and I left my American credit card in the hotel because if I used that, I would get charged roaming fees for every purchase I made. So I spent the day giving my friends direct cash payouts to borrow their credit cards. In the morning, we weren't able to enter the park for an hour once again because we hadn't set our arrival date fast enough, and the first hour entry was already sold out. The park responded us by leaving us in the 110-degree parking lot in the direct sunlight for close to an hour without any form of shade or water, and that moment single-handedly fucked us. Like, all my friends basically got heat stroke from that alone. Upon getting inside, my friends all glitched out bad from the heat, the lack of water, and us barely sleeping on the bus. We all reacted like Pikmin being set on fire. Then, finally, after we were able to collect ourselves, we started going to the pavilions, but I want to say because of the heat stroke index and because of some weird official statement from like the expo principal or whoever the fuck was running the fucking World's Fair today, some guy told us that we should just try to see 4 pavilions and then go home, and I was like, fuck that, I'm going to see them all. Let's see how many I see, or I guess I'm seeing none of them because they all fucking need lottery tickets. I had a mini meltdown after that because I couldn't get into the Gundam Pavilion, and it didn't even have a line, but once again, fucking lottery crap. So then we ran across the street to the surprisingly open Australian Pavilion, which for some reason was full of fake robot animals, but filled with real manure to make it convincing that even though these were fake robot animals, they smelled like shit. Anyway, so we basically stood in the Australian Pavilion for, I want to say, 20 minutes to take a heat stroke emergency break meeting in the Australian Pavilion, try to get our phones to work, try to get any lottery tickets to trigger, and eventually we just got completely pissed off and gave the hell up and decided to just walk around randomly and do whatever the fuck we could do. Next up, we went to the Indian Pavilion next door, which seemed to be working as both a top-class Indian embassy and a ridiculous curry restaurant. The curry made us hungry, so then we went to get lunch. For lunch, we got salads or something from the salad bar. Everyone had told us the food at the expo sucked, and they were right. It was super overpriced crap. We paid like $30 for a salad. We then went into the night pavilion. That was very short. And then we tried to get inside the Shoji Kawamori Pavilion, but again, reservations only. By then, we were suffering bad from heat stroke again, so we cowered inside the Finland Pavilion. The Finland Pavilion was literally just a heat stroke recovery room where people sat in air-conditioned darkness on couches. We tried to regain our marbles after that because we were like fighting off heat stroke bad. We were on the verge of giving up on the event entirely because it was going so shitty. But then right outside the Finland Pavilion, we encountered this Lapras statue. And then we all remembered the other stupid reason we had come to the World's Fair was to play Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go had a unique stamp rally where you could catch a Pikachu, a Bulbasaur, a Charmander, and a Squirtle with special World's Fair backgrounds. And then we realized that if we just went around the big ring, we could hit all the Pokemon statues and get ourselves some super proprietary, unique Pokemon Go crap. Now, instantly, all my friends cared about that, but I didn't. My phone was kind of dead from the 120-degree heat and frantically trying to get last-minute lottery tickets to the Gundam Pavilion. So I didn't really care about Pokemon Go, but I decided to be a good sport about it and go along with everyone anyway, because it was just such a shit show, man. Anyway, so we started chasing Pokemon, and we followed the big ring around, and we ended up at the Algiers Pavilion once again to hide from heat stroke and get air conditioning again. Then somehow we went all around the park and we ended up at the Qatar Pavilion, which was another pavilion with no line. Now, after that, we bought a kite for some reason. Another massive mistake. This kite was huge and would stick with us for the rest of the week. After that, I want to say we stopped at the Arab Emirates Pavilion for a drink. There, I initially accidentally ordered this horrible, horrible drink. It was like camel milk and goat cheese in a smoothie, and it looked like a vanilla milkshake, but it tasted straight up like ass. It tasted like barf. It made me want to barf the second I licked it. The guy running the pavilion was a super cool dude named Kyle from Toronto. He seemed to specialize just in working at the World's Fair. He seems to be like a World's Fair carny who travels the world, only working at the World's Fair. So he switched it up on me for like a sour watermelon juice, which was sour, but hey, it was watermelon juice. I could drink it at least. Kyle was a nice freaking guy. While he was swapping out my drink, he mentioned that he would worked at the Dubai Expo a few years ago, and it had been run much better. It didn't have any of the lottery crap. That was fully Japan being Japan. Then we passed by the Canada Pavilion, which was next door. We didn't go inside, but it seemed to be a similar concept where you sat on an iceberg eating ice cream. That's kind of funny because there's like 2 levels of ice. Anyway, the line to do that was too long, so we were good at that point. Now, at this point, I was basically over the World's Fair, having got like borderline heat stroke and all my dreams being burned or ruined by like lotteries and the lack of like the ability to stand in line and just do what you want. We stopped in an igloo briefly, but the igloo wasn't cold. And then our last time wasting activity was we did the Future City exhibit, which was very dystopian in reality. I don't know how they expect the economy of the future to work, but it pretty much painted this picture of like a future robot-driven, AI-driven society where robots do 100% of all jobs and humans just like, I don't know, or cattle or whatever. It had robot taxis, robot lunch ladies, robot bulldozers destroying things, additional robots building robot cities after the fact. I just did not see a place for people in this completely robot society. But I guess that's the World's Fair for you, just showing you a image into a possible future. I guess I'm regretting now that I didn't get anything at the freaking gift shop because I was so angry. Apparently there was actually some proprietary Gundam merch in there, but I was just so angry and pissed about the way the day had played out that I didn't want anything after that. I just wanted to go home and soak in a bathtub and get out of the fucking 120 degree Osaka heat. And yeah, so we went back to our hotel, went straight to bed after that, and I didn't even mention that the mascot was a fucking hideous 8-eyed Muppet monster, but yeah, this was horrible. The only like silver lining was like I saw some other people who would like literally like plan their entire vacation, like do this for multiple days, and I cannot see that working out at all unless you only spent a few hours here and you had direct reservations for everything you planned to do. Anyway, the next day we went to Universal Studios Japan, and that was a much better experience, so that's the next video. All right, thank you. I'm sad. Later.
But there's another World's Fair coming soon, right? Before Friday?
Hey everybody, it's me, Buster Green, and welcome back to this video series where I'm going through Japan doing a bunch of anime tourist traps. And today I've reached Universal Studios Japan, home to some of the craziest anime tourist traps in the world. Alright, so after the hell disaster of the World's Fair, the next day we went to Universal Studios Japan, and overall, it was great. Universal Studios Japan is not a tourist trap, it's just very expensive. Although there still was a little bit of drama here. Okay, so I'll quick preface that Universal Studios Florida is one of my favorite theme parks ever, but I also haven't been there since I was a kid because I'm poor and my grandma used to take me and then she died and then I could never go again. Anyway, I remember as a kid there were so many sick-ass rides at Universal Studios Florida, like Back to the Future, the Ghostbusters show. There was a King Kong ride that bizarrely smelled like strawberries. Beetlejuice was just there randomly walking around. They had a Jaws ride and, I don't know, Earthquake, the old Charlton Heston movie apparently. Anyway, that's basically what I remember about Universal Studios from a kid. Oh, also there was this really, really cool like simulator ride based on like Alfred Hitchcock and the Jetsons. Those are super cool. Anyway, there was also the non-interactive Nickelodeon Studios next door, and I feel like I saw the like turned off set for Gullah Gullah Island there. Anyway, it's pretty obvious I haven't been to Universal Studios since I was a kid. I did visit Islands of Adventure one time when I was 14, but I was also somehow just too short to go on most of the rides at that time, except for Jurassic Park. So if I ever go back to Islands of Adventure, I basically need to do everything. Anyway, in 2011, when I lived in Japan, I passed by Universal Studios Japan, and that looked super effing cool, but I was too poor and too busy, so I didn't go. So somehow it ended up pretty high on the slots in my Japan FOMO list, and then when I decided to go to the World's Fair, turns out the World's Fair is literally across the street from Universal Studios Japan. So now I was completely locked into going. Going there was an absolute no-brainer. So Universal Studios Japan is somehow ranked as both the finest Universal Studios in the world and one of the best theme parks in all of Asia. The allure of the #1 Universal Studios park and its cool Japan exclusive rides makes it just too cool to pass up. Anyway, I'll cut to the chase, and I will let you know that overall this year, I found the Cool Japan anime offerings to be pretty lackluster overall. So on the day I was there in August of 2025, they had like 5 of the following anime-themed activities, ranked from coolest to uncoolest. At the uncoolest, number 5 was the park's temporary collab with the anime The Apothecary Diaries, which I've never gotten into, but it seemed to boil down to being a cosplay anime ramen cafe, and that's all it was. It was a special place to buy green ramen. Mega unspecial, and by the time I got there, they had already stopped serving ramen for the night. Although there still were a large number of cosplayers in the park, seemingly attending the park just to get that sweet green ramen. Next up at number 4 was the cool night reskin of the Waterworld show that apparently cost extra money to attend, and where they randomly add One Piece character to the show and try really, really hard to play out this what if Monkey D. Luffy visited Waterworld scenario. Now, we didn't have time to check that out because it was too crowded and too crazy, but apparently it costs extra because people are just way too hardcore about it. I saw like cosplayers of One Piece just there for the show. I've also heard gossip around the block that the guy who plays Sanji in the show is a total chick magnet and often has to beat off Horn Dog Fujiyoshis with a stick. Number 3, something I barely glimpsed but didn't see in its full glory, was the Pokemon Water Gun Fight Parade show. I missed this, but I did get shot by a water gun and it sounded really cool. Then at number 2 was Spy Family The Ride, which I'll be reviewing in a different video because I have a lot to say about that ride, and my friend got sick on there. And number 1 is the park's long-standing Detective Conan ride, which has been at the park for close to over 10 years now, and is kind of the park's signature anime/Universal Studios special experience. And for reasons I'll reveal later, there's a lot of confusing misinformation about this ride, so I'm also going to do a separate video about this ride too, and that'll probably come out tomorrow. And also, there were also special anime audio tracks for One Piece and Spy Family in the Hollywood Dream roller coaster, but those are barely noticeable and kind of worthless if you don't understand Japanese. But I am annoyed that these are marked on the website as being completely separate different rides when they're just audio tracks for the Dream Coaster. Alright, so the next difficulty of USJ is unfortunately that to visit Nintendo World and also Harry Potter World, you need to buy a Fast Pass. And quite frankly, the Fast Pass is also critical if you want to do all or most of the park's large-scale rides in a single day. So buying the pass did allow me to do that, so I was happy with it. But I still agonized over buying the pass because the pass was really expensive. It was about $200 a person, despite entry to the park otherwise being only about $70 a person. So yeah, full price of a day at USJ without food was starting at $270 here. Anyway, you literally have to buy it or they won't let you into Nintendo Land, so they kind of had us like dead to rights here. The other thing is I want to say Universal offers like 7 different Fast Passes with various differing levels of quality and what you get, ranging in cost from $200 to $1,000 for the day you're there, and the $200 one that I got was the cheapest one. Anyway, when I started playing out the trip like a year ago, the Donkey Kong Minecart Madness had just opened, and the Donkey Kong DLC area was brand new, and almost every single Fast Pass would guarantee you a Donkey Kong ride. But by the time we actually got there, they had stopped doing that, and that stressed me out because I really wanted to go on Donkey Kong, and it turned out the only way to get a Donkey Kong Fast Pass was to buy this like ultra exclusive Nintendo World Super Fan Pass that was like $700 for the day. That majorly stressed me out at the time, but then stupid enough, I found out that when I actually went to Nintendo World, the Donkey Kong ride barely had a line because there was so much intense crowd control in the Nintendo World section of the park that no one could actually get back to Donkey Kong Country to go on the ride. And most of the people in Nintendo World were over obsessed with all the other things to do there, so the Donkey Kong ride was kind of being ignored just on the basis that it was the farthest thing back in the farthest area. Now, anyway, yeah, the Fast Pass thing, buying it stressed me out the most. I guess I realized after the fact, after I went there, that sometimes if the rides don't have a Fast Pass option, it's just because there's no point for it. No one's going on those rides, so why sell one? Honestly, aside for the first couple of hours the park was open, I also didn't think the crowds were that bad. I mean, it was 120 degrees on this day, but I wouldn't say the crowds were any better or worse than an average day at Universal Studios Florida or Universal Studios Florida when I went there as a kid 20 years ago. So I'll let you guys know pretty much the tickets we got for our group for $200 consisted of basic entry to Harry Potter World in the morning, then a free timed entry ride on the Harry Potter ride. Then we had to be at Nintendo World at 11. We had to be at the Mario Kart ride first thing as soon as we entered Nintendo Land. And then after that, we had 2 option tickets. One was a roller coaster option for either the Hollywood Dream or the Jurassic Park Dinosaur Hangar, and one boat type ride option for either Jaws or Jurassic Park. So I'm going to let you guys know a hack here. We printed out paper copies of our tickets, which the park overall discourages you from doing because technically if the paper gets damaged by water or sweat or humidity, the paper will stop working. But we just protected it in our bags and our wallets. And there was a secret advantage to doing this in that the paper tickets can technically be transferred. Because what happened was one of the people in our group had zero interest in doing any of the roller coaster rides, so they were able to trade their roller coaster rides to me, and that way I got to go on both of the roller coaster rides with a Fast Pass, and that was super freaking cool, and I felt great about that. Okay, with that preamble out of the way, here's how our day went, and I want to say it went really good until it didn't.
この番組はヨランのスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
Alright, so we arrived in the morning at USJ at about 8:30, trying to give ourselves an hour to reach the Harry Potter reservation, which was at 9:30. Now, once again, it was already 100 degrees in the morning, and somehow I think I was finally used to that by now, but still the line to get into USJ was already a full-blown nightmare, with millions and millions of people rushing the door first thing in the morning. Now, I also noticed a few shifty Americans trying to butt in line, screw them, and I also noticed this horrible lady who looked like a Kardashian and straight up was like butting through everyone and straight up abusing everyone and acting like she was God. This like furious French family manifested and noticed her crass behavior and started like screaming at her and like cursing her out and damning her to hell in French. I don't think she noticed because she didn't speak French, but I understood enough words that they were like, blah, Jezebel, I don't know. Anyway, I will say that unlike the World's Fair, USJ at least had everyone in line under a shaded canopy, so at least we weren't getting heat stroke just trying to walk into the park, which is what happened at the World's Fair. Anyway, we got in, we rushed down to the Harry Potter land, and I somehow sort of knew where it was, even though I'd never been here before, because all the Universal parks are basically shaped like a big donut with a lake in the middle. We walked by where the Pokemon water gun fight was going to be, and one of the guys there setting up shot me with ice water. That felt so great. The water guns were actually refrigerated, and that was kind of an incredible feeling. Anyway, apparently the Harry Potter ride is the exact same one as the one in Florida, just dubbed into Japanese, and we all had a great time on it. We got breakfast after that at the Hogsmeade Harry Potter Tavern. I got a Harry Potter pot pie and a frozen butterbeer, and I was only let down that despite many of the products at this restaurant being based on corn, since we were in Japan, there was no butter. I forgot that butter is an American product. Go figure. Anyway, then we wasted half a minute looking up dumb merch. Apparently the exclusive item of Harry Potter World is a robot owl. My friends were somewhat defiant on the claims that our Harry Potter Land tickets would be locked after we entered, but they hadn't locked the door yet when we arrived, and they got cocky about that. But yeah, as soon as we left, they locked the door and we could never go back. So we went to Nintendo Land after that, and I had wanted to buy one of those corny Amiibo watch things, but once again I got sticker shock finding out that the single stupid plastic watch cost $40. And it didn't bother me at the time because the line to interact with all those Mario coin collecting doodads was longer than the longest lines in the entire park. So it felt kind of stupid to me at the time, but then later on, at the end of the day, I found out that those watches are way more expensive in the US due to tariffs, and you can apparently only buy them from a weird guy at the Nintendo Land gate because none of the other gift shops at Universal Studios will sell them to you, which is entirely infuriating because by the time I had fully changed my mind that I wanted to buy one, I couldn't go back into Nintendo Land. And then my FOMO kicked in. Damn it, surprise charges. Why you gotta keep surprising me with stuff I want to buy and then making it more money than I'm prepared to pay? Anyway, so Nintendo Land was overall great. We did the Mario Kart ride right away. That was definitely maybe the best ride in the park. And I think probably the best memories of us being in Nintendo Land are just us walking through the dumb, crazy line in the Mario Kart ride. We did skip on doing the Yoshi ride because of the brutal heat stroke index and because it looked like a monorail for babies. Then we waited in line for Donkey Kong. The line for that only took an hour, and then after that we got one of those Donkey Kong ice creams in the cool DK barrels. Super effing worth it, although it did have popcorn as a topping on top, which was kind of weird for ice cream. After that, we departed original Nintendo Land to never return. So sad. We went on Jaws the ride after that, and I want to point out that this is the last surviving copy of the original Jaws ride that all the Universal Studios in America have somehow destroyed. And considering that this is the 50th anniversary of Jaws, I think it's never been more relevant to go on the Jaws ride. Anyway, I was super happy just to be back in the nostalgic Amity section of the park with all the cheap American fake seafood, and I am impressed at hell that USJ has just kept this thing running perfectly for all these years, although technically it's only running as well as the one at Florida ever did. And they also have a minor advantage here in that their version of the ride is 11 years younger than the Florida one, and therefore has a couple of minor behind-the-scenes improvements. But hey, the shark still got stuck at the end of the ride just like the one in Florida used to, and honestly, that was perfect for me. I don't think Jaws the ride would really be Jaws the ride if the shark didn't get stuck at a climactic moment like that. Now, I did see some more rude Europeans casting curses here, and once again, Japan is not a playground for all these freaking people. They need to piss off. Anyway, after Jaws, we went to see another massively ancient thing, the old Waterworld show from 1994, because apparently Osaka kind of knows what's up, that people are here to cool off and get wet. So there were pirates in this Waterworld show spraying everyone here with their cool-ass water guns. Now, also, to my surprise, this thing still exists. Apparently, it also still exists at Universal Studios in Hollywood, but they did just announce that this week they're finally shutting it down. Maybe they should just replace it with a dedicated One Piece show like the Japan side did, especially since One Piece is like rising in value on Netflix. Anyway, while at the Waterworld show, there was this interesting British guy who talked me into translating the entire show for him and his wife, and I did. I ended up acting out a full translation of the entire show on the spot, and I kind of had a good time with it. That being said, I was kind of surprised and amused that the Waterworld show, despite being the same old Waterworld show that Universal Studios had created in 1994, did have a couple of weird Japanese cultural sensitivity micro tweaks to the story, and seemingly the goal of these tweaks was to make the show overall less woke, as they'd say in America. Because aside from the violence being toned up and a number of dirty jokes being thrown in mixed with your corny, typical theme park dad level jokes, it mostly came down to Jean Triplehorn's character Helen being highly sexualized in this really over-the-top comedic Japanese classical way. Like, there were people shooting water guns at her shirt to get her boobs wet, and ridiculous scenes where she slipped on a banana peel and fell on the ground like a buffoon so everyone could laugh at her little girl panties. It's super fascinating for me because I know the show has been running since 1994. I know the story of Waterworld, and there just had to be one day where some Japanese executive in Osaka was like, well, this strong American action woman character is great and all, but I think everyone would find her a lot more enjoyable if she was a ditzy Nimrod idiot and her skirt was constantly falling down. And with the whole recent Gamergate crap about Japanese localizations toning down the sexualism for America, this is my first time ever seeing an American product where they actually toned it up for Japan. I guess it happens, but wow, seeing it in action was crazy. Japan is so weird when it comes to women and feminism. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. After that, I went on to the Hollywood Dream Ride. Alright, so this ride is news to me. I thought this was a Universal Studios Japan original roller coaster, and it kinda is, but it kinda isn't. So it's actually a massive upgrade and improvement adaptation of apparently Universal Studios Florida's first roller coaster, the Rip Ride Rocket, that I guess was created recently. Only the Dream has bigger cars, a longer track, and while the Rip Ride Rocket apparently went with a distinctly Florida-style white trash rock and beer motif, that seemed to please no one, and numerous people claimed it was the trashiest, worst roller coaster in Florida. The Hollywood Dream in Japan is the total exact opposite. They went with a super high-class motif of a 1940s luxury hotel in Hollywood that just so happens to have a random roller coaster in the center of it. And apparently the American version was actually just permanently shut down a few weeks ago because so many people hated it, and now so this is another hyper-limited USJ exclusive ride. Go figure. USJ is just interesting as hell for me because it started out as like a carbon copy clone of Universal Studios Florida, but it keeps being dealt the same hand that Universal Studios Florida got, but it makes minor different choices, and it repeatedly keeps winning with the same hands that Florida keeps failing with and breaking the rides and destroying them, and it's crazy. It's just this crazy alternate history theme park where everything that went wrong went right here. And anyway, yeah. So back to the Hollywood Dream, you should be aware that for some reason the Hollywood Dream has like 4 different audio tracks that play with the coaster, and sometimes these are listed as their own ride. One thing that actually is a different ride is the Hollywood Dream Backdraft Remix, a special version of the ride that happens every 10 minutes or so, where one of the cars on the ride is just played in reverse. This is apparently super terrifying. Anyway, then after that, my friend gave me their unused roller coaster pass ticket, so I teleported over to Jurassic Park to do the other roller coaster, the Flying Dinosaur. This is somehow the most expensive roller coaster in Japan. I wasn't that impressed by it, but I guess because it's built into like a Jurassic Park style dinosaur prison, that at least was kind of cool. Retroactively, I think I actually preferred the Hollywood Dream just for being a more unique ride and a more cool long-distance roller coaster that spanned the entire diameter of the park. And I was able to do the 2 stupid Minion rides after that because they had no lines. Okay, so hey everyone, welcome back to my review of Universal Studios Japan. In this video, I'm going to give you some information about Universal Studios' most exclusive anime ride, which this year is Spy Family the Ride, where you and Anya steal and wreck a school bus. Also, if you're really curious, I didn't do the Apothecary Diaries ride because it wasn't a ride, it was a goddamn cosplay ramen shop. Okay, here's your clickbait title for this video. Okay, sorry, that's not actually clickbait. My friend really did end up in the hospital after this ride, but I'll tell you about that at the end of the video. First things first, I want to ruminate on how Universal Studios Japan is just such a weird mutation, alternate history evolution of Universal Studios Florida. It was seemingly designed at first to be an exact copy, but in their 30-year history, they've gone in severe opposite different ways, with Universal Studios Japan seemingly maintaining its historical rides extremely well, while Florida has expanded out into expensive DLC subparks. Now, I do want to talk about E.T. the Ride. That is a beloved ride that only still exists at Universal Studios Florida, where you live through the movie E.T. riding a bicycle through all the most exciting beats of the movie before returning E.T. to his superior alien utopia society. Now, while I give USJ extreme credit for maintaining and in some ways improving on their version of Jaws the Ride, the Waterworld show, and the Hollywood Dream roller coaster, they didn't keep E.T. E.T. was the lone one they messed up. E.T. somehow just didn't gel with Japanese audiences. Maybe they didn't think he was that cute. Maybe they didn't like him compared to Anya or Pikachu. Maybe E.T. just wasn't a cultural phenomenon in Japan the way it was in the US. So after 8 years of impressing no one in Japan, E.T. was finally closed and fully fired by Japan. Once again, E.T. had failed a major industry and was buried in the desert of New Mexico. And the ride was destroyed with the building leading into it left alone. So the ride was then replaced by this very Disney-esque Space Mountain clone called the Space Fantasy Coaster. This basically is your complete copy of Space Mountain from Disneyland, with the only big difference being that the cars are specifically designed to be able to pull off race car drifting. That's kind of cool, but otherwise it's Space Mountain. Now, I knew that the Spy Family ride at Universal Japan was a reskin of the old Lupin the Third ride, but what I didn't realize until now is that it's also this ride. Apparently, the deep, dark secret of Universal Studios Japan is that actually almost every single year they plug an exclusive anime ride, and aside from Detective Conan, all the exclusive rides they're always plugging are actually secretly just this ride with a few of the decorations changed. So yeah, since 2016, Space Fantasy apparently got too boring, they added a VR headset to all the cars, and they've been re-theming the ride over and over again, using VR headsets and video game assets to create a series of slightly different, alternate, chaotic ideas. In 2016, the ride was rethemed for the first time to Kari Kari Pamu Pamu VR Madness Coaster, seemingly maybe USJ's alternative to the stupid Jimmy Fallon ride. That only lasted a year, then it became Evangelion the Ride, then it became Final Fantasy the Ride, Lupin the Ride, which I heard about, Attack on Titan the ride, which I didn't hear about. Stand By Me Doraemon movie the ride. That was directed by Takashi Yamazaki, and it was quite good. Demon Slayer Mugen Train the ride. That sounds cool, actually. Good fit for a roller coaster. Stand By Me Doraemon 2 ride. Wow, the sequel got one too. Demon Slayer Swordsmith Village, the movie ride. That was kind of filler content. I don't know how you make a ride out of that. And this year, finally, it's Spy Family the ride, involving Anya in a school bus. So yeah, I'm impressed that they keep changing the IP on this thing, but otherwise horrified that none of these otherwise supposedly impressive USJ anime rides ever actually existed, because turns out they were all the same fucking ride and we've just been bamboozled over and over again. So none of these rides ever existed at the same time as each other, because they're all the same goddamn ride. They just change out what the anime is that plays in the ride. So yeah, today I did the Spy Family version. It was okay. Anya snuck around the line, bad spies were trying to kill her, so she stole a school bus and the whole family helped her get away. I could totally imagine how this could easily be rethemed to Lupin III. Not so much Doraemon or Evangelion or whatever, but I guess they keep figuring out ways to make it work. Alright, so back to the clickbait headline that my friend got knocked out by this ride. Here's what happened here, because it is 50% the ride's fault, but it's also 50% my friend's fault for just not drinking enough water on a brutal 120-degree day in Osaka. At the World's Fair on Monday, when we arrived in Osaka, we were struggling so hard not to get heat stroke, and Universal Studios Japan, meanwhile, was set up to be a little bit easier. They were trying a little bit harder to not give people heat stroke. There were shade canopies, there were mist fans, so I want to say we got a little bit more lax in terms of fighting the sun there. And even though we got wet from the water guns around the park in the Jaws ride, I think my friend just made the critical mistake of just not drinking enough water when it was 120 out. Apparently the silver bullet was right before we got on this ride. There was a Coke machine there, and my friend bought a Coke from the Coke machine, and then we waited in line in the heat. Now, seemingly the caffeine in the Coke dehydrated my friend so much that also brought upon the heat stroke. And my friend is just a soda drunkie who refused to drink water, and they also had a water fountain outside the ride, but my friend also refused to drink the water. I also refused to drink the water by at least splashing on my arms and face to cool myself down, and that's why I didn't get heat stroke. Now, finally, upon going on the ride, because it was VR and you were wearing a VR headset on a roller coaster, that's kind of insane. My friend basically got motion sickness from the VR on the roller coaster, and even though the motion sickness wasn't that severe, it somehow mixed with them being on the edge of getting heat stroke, and they finally got off the ride with a full motion sickness heat stroke cocktail and went straight to Universal Studios Woody Woodpecker Memorial Hospital. Now, I took my friend to the hospital and we all went together as a party, but I will say I was very annoyed that the Japanese nurse there was, in my opinion, way too slow about getting them water, despite me angrily demanding it in Japanese. Now, after that, my friend was fine, they fell asleep, and they slept for the rest of the day in a bed, and then eventually my other friend took them in a cab back to our hotel. Now, since this happened, we unfortunately did not get to go on Jurassic Park the ride, but that's okay, because it's apparently 100% the same one as Florida, so I overall don't care. After seeing my friends off in the cab to go back to the hotel, though, I stayed behind because I had to review one last Japanese tourist trap for the night. I had to review Detective Conan the Ride, and I'm making this video because there is so much confusion and misinformation about this ride, and I need to clear the air here. So this is its own video because I feel like this information might be urgent for some confused Conan fan out there who speaks English and not Japanese and wants to have a great vacation. And otherwise, if you stumbled onto this video randomly, check out my previous videos about USJ as a whole, how we got tickets, and how the Spy Family ride put my friend in the hospital. So the big weirdness to the Detective Conan ride, and I think this also might overlap with the One Piece characters doing their own version of the Waterworld show, is they sell tickets for this ride. They technically sell Fast Pass tickets for this ride, and what's weird is they sell them constantly at the front door, and that threw me off because I wasn't sure what the deal was with that here. No other rides at the park have constant Fast Pass tickets like this. Like the ones that you had to buy to get into Nintendo World and Harry Potter Land, they had to be bought like in a hyper reservation almost 2 months in advance. Wait, I did book my rides at Universal Studios 2 months in advance. Damn it, USJ, you made a monkey out of me. At least I didn't need a special app to do it. Anyway, I want to very clearly explain this because no one was around to explain this to me. You do not have to buy tickets to go to the Detective Conan show or the One Piece show. Except maybe on some days, maybe you do, and that's complicated. Alright, so let me explain. The Detective Conan ride is very cool because, like Mario Kart, it's one of the only rides in the park that is fully air conditioned in an air conditioned theater from the second you get in the line to the second you leave. Like, I mean, it's very cool because there's air conditioning. Because this is obviously a massive relief from the 120-degree Osaka heat. Millions of people who go to Universal Studios bum rush these two rides as their number one things to do in the park, especially around the heat of the day when people are just running away from the sun in absolute misery. Now, despite this being the case, tickets are not required to see the show, but the tickets you buy guarantees that you will see the show. My point is, I really wanted to see the show and I wanted to see what it was, but I didn't want to buy a ticket for it because I already spent a lot of money on this trip and I was kind of broke by this point in the week. I was also quite shocked to understand and realize when I got there that the tickets are completely optional. It's like they allow so many free people to just go into the ride freely, but every time someone buys a ticket, one less free random person is allowed to go inside. So while the ticket guarantees that you get to see the show, if you don't have a ticket, you can still see it, you just have to tank through the line. And there is always the possibility that the line could be shortened down or cut off if too many people bought tickets to one particular time slot. So that's what's up with the Detective Conan tickets. You don't need them unless you're truly making seeing Detective Conan at Universal Studios your number one objective for the day, or you're specifically trying to schedule the Conan show to avoid certain weather conditions at certain times of the day. I'm so fucking relieved I finally figured that out, because that was driving me insane before I arrived, and I was considering seriously paying the $30 to see the Conan show because it is Universal Studios Japan's number one exclusive ride. Anyway, so I went to the ride last thing in the day, and there were no Fast Pass tickets at all because the line was actually half empty because most people are going to this ride just to use it as an air conditioning break. And at night, there's not as many people doing that. So I just waited in the normal line, and I want to say I was like person 30 in line out of like the theater holding a maximum capacity of like 300 people. All right, so now that that's all cleared up, the next big thing I was confused about is what the hell is this ride? And that's another thing that's confusing because for whatever reason, the park lies about what this is. And then there's also just some bullshit from people who just don't even know and they're just like making up stories. Like someone told me this ride was an escape room because the poster showed Conan holding up a bomb. And I guess they just assume that if it's got a bomb, it's an escape room. But no, it's not an escape room. There's no escaping of any kind. Okay, wait. Edit here. Okay, crazy change. So as I looked deeper into it, apparently there actually was a Detective Conan escape room at USJ like 3 years ago, but I guess it no longer exists. But then I guess when I was trying to figure out what the deal was with the Conan ride that they're now, I was somehow getting fed like ghost data from maybe an AI or just someone out of the loop about the escape room. So that's further confusion. It seems that the main reason there's so much confusion and wrong information about the Conan ride is because there have been, I want to say, dozens of Conan rides in the past like 20 years since USJ opened. I'm not sure what its initial form was, but then the live show happened, and then the escape room seems like it went through several revisions over the years, and all this dead data is very confusing to realize what's actually there right now. And I guess that will continue to be a problem in the future as they continue to change and update the ride. Anyway, the whole reason I'm making this video is to set the record straight. So let's just burn all that away. Here's the truth about Detective Conan the ride at Universal Studios.
この番組は予覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
I would say in my definition, it's like a live show mixed with a 4D movie, mixed with some good old-fashioned Hollywood magic. So the ride basically lies about what it is, which is weird and unusual. And prior to arriving at the ride has themed itself around a Detective Conan super skyscraper called, like, I want to say the Bellport Theater. And at the pre-show for the ride, they imply that the theater is actually this dangerous giant elevator machine where the theater's audience will be raised in the air, rotated 360 degrees for no sensible reason. And that sounded super cool to me, but that's a lie. That's not actually true. And this lie actually made my friends chicken out on this ride because they were worried it was going to be like a crazy Gravitron thing or something. But it's a lie. That's not what it is. It's just a movie theater. The theater just implies that it can rotate 360 degrees, but it doesn't actually do that. The actual room never moves. It just uses some projection mapping tricks and some perspective tricks and like a disco ball to like imply that it's moving. But the other thing is like technically the chairs you're sitting in move a tiny bit. It's not like a normal like 4D movie theater like where the chairs shake back and forth. I just want to say over the course of the show, they slowly raise up a millimeter by a millimeter before they drop you down like 1 inch at the end of the show to surprise you. It's startling, but it's not really a ride at all. It's just for 1 second your chair moves. But for this 1 second, there are several motion sickness warnings for both the stage illusion and the chair dropping bit that I think, in my opinion, they're kind of overdoing it. Unless you are seriously elderly or pregnant, then maybe it could be bad. Anyway, that aside, let's go into the story. The story here is amazing. It's actually one of the greatest Conan stories I think I've ever seen. The story here is that you're a crowd that has been invited to this party to look at this diamond one night. But as the night unfolds, it's slowly and organically revealed very obtusely that the audience are actually in the middle of this massive sting operation orchestrated by Detective Conan and Amuro to take down Detective Conan's archenemy, Kaito Kid. That setup was so freaking badass. My favorite thing about this experience is that every aspect of the ride is meticulously scored up perfectly with the old jazzy 1990s Detective Conan background soundtracks, and honestly just walking through that was fun as hell for me. The other weirdness is that as you're watching the 4D movie, there are numerous real actors interacting with the movie and interacting with several places around the theater. And as the movie goes on, characters will actually come in and out of the movie screen like it's the movie like Last Action Hero, becoming like these real people and interacting with the audience. Like, if I had to compare this ride to anything in the US, I'd say it's probably the closest to like Muppet Vision 4D, rest in peace. But even then, that ride relied on constant performances from animatronic Muppets, and this ride relies on perfectly timed, perfectly trained actors giving perfect performances 18 times a day, and that is, in my book, way more impressive. I'm not sure how many actors they have running the show or how often they swap them out, but that's amazing. I think that's just crazy that they're doing this so many times a day and doing it perfect every single time. So that was the ride. After the fact, the gift shop was cool too. The Conan gift shop had this amazing freaking t-shirt of Detective Conan going on the Jaws ride, and I kind of super wanted that, but I already bought too many t-shirts on this trip, so that's another thing I have FOMO about. All right, and with that, I've concluded my review of Universal Studios Japan. It was a happy vacation and it came to the end. I did every single ride in the park except Jurassic Park, and I was happy for how it went down, except for the fact that my friend got super sick on Spy Family. But definitely, as the events went on and have been pushed back in my past, I now still have more FOMO for the stuff I didn't buy there, especially the Mario Band. Next time in this video series, we're going to the world's largest statue of Shin Godzilla, and me and my friends will be hunting for hyper-exclusive anime merchandise in Japan's Deadly Whirl Islands. Alright, hey everybody, it's me, Buster Green, and welcome back to the Anime Tourist Trap trip, and this is probably the grandest episode of the trip, as today we're going to one of the craziest tourist traps in all of Japan. Alright, so anyway, I think one thing I want to emphasize about this trip is that I play a lot of video games. And because video games were mostly made by nerdy Japanese developers, there's this low-level psychic resonance in them that usually points me in the right direction just based on the hints that are there. Hence, me taking my anime crew to the Nakano Broadway and having an amazing time there was based entirely on the vague but hyper-specific direction in the game Digimon Cyber Sleuth that the Nakano Broadway is full of Digimon. Why would they say that? I guess it was true. There was Digimon stuff there. Anyway, today though, we're going old school and we're going back to Pokemon Gold and Silver, the Johto region. And Pokemon Gold and Silver is extensively based on the Kansai region in real-life Japan, and if anything, this day had the distinct air of Pokemon Silver, as I basically managed to travel all the hell over real-life Kansai, going through most of the game's major locations in a single day, which wasn't intentional, but retroactively thinking about it now and everything I did, I'm kind of proud of myself. It also helps that in real life, the Kansai region isn't nearly as large as it is when it's depicted in Pokemon Gold, and yet at the same time, as a real place, it is freaking huge. It's like, I don't know, 8 different cities. I guess it's kind of crazy because in Pokemon 1, you get to explore basically a very large area that mostly consists of the Tokyo metropolitan area, and you would assume that based on that and the notoriety there, the Kansai cities would be farther apart. But the reality is that they're all pretty much within an hour's drive away from each other. All right, so in the morning we checked out of our boring, expensive Universal Studios hotel and went to Universal City Walk one more time for breakfast, and mostly just to check it out because we really didn't have time to check it out before that. Now, one fascinating difference between USJ's City Walk and the ones in America is while the ones in America are a bunch of expensive, ultra-high-class restaurants that stay open extra late for the weary travelers visiting Universal Studios, the Japanese City Walk is actually completely different. It looks like your typical city walk, but all the places here are just normal Japanese chain restaurants with zero food inflation of any sort. They just sell ramen and udon and hamburgers for like $3 a pop, which is crazy because the park food is actually way more expensive. Although it's really not that expensive. Actually, USJ's food was pretty fair, price-wise, considering how good the quality was. And Japan as a whole has been pretty good about food prices, if nothing else. At least, like, I didn't go hungry in Japan, and somehow their food is healthier and I lost weight. What the hell? Anyway, I guess just I gotta respect Japan for valuing things differently, especially when it comes to like basic nutrition. Anyway, after eating breakfast at City Walk, we worked as fast as possible to get to Awaji Island. To put this into Pokemon Gold terms for you guys, we woke up in Goldenrod City. Universal Studios / the World's Fair are basically the global Wi-Fi terminal from Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and our objective today was to work through the entire Kansai Johto map over to Cianwood City, past the Whirl Islands to see Lugia. Nah, just kidding. We're actually seeing Shin Godzilla, which is actually way worse than Lugia. Not at all a welcoming character. Okay, so I should probably clarify what our real goal is. Due to the proximity of USJ and the World's Fair, we decided that we would visit Awaji Island, aka Cianwood City from Pokemon, and here's why we're going there. This anime tourist trap trip that we're on, quite frankly, hasn't had enough anime tourist traps. I found USJ's anime tourist traps offering just not anime enough because, you know, there was the whole Detective Conan thing just being a $30 live show that you technically didn't have to pay money for, and the Spy Family ride turning out to be every single previous USJ anime ride ever was massively deflating. And yeah, also there was that green ramen. So anyway, we decided to head to Awaji's signature tourist trap, the Nijigen no Mori, which translates to the two-dimensional forest. So is Nijigen no Mori a tourist trap?
この番組はヨランのスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
Yes, severe level tourist trap. And yet, this might be the grandest and largest tourist trap we've seen along the way, but it is a crazy super tourist trap designed implicitly to target foreigners and take away their foreign money. And it's a little bit unfriendly, a little bit hard to figure it out from just the perspective of an outsider, but if you're willing to come here, they definitely have a handful of great things to do, see, eat, and buy. So Nijigen no Mori somehow positions itself as a very interesting alternative to USJ. And I would argue that, yeah, it's definitely an alternative, that's to say the least. But before I get into what it is, I'll just start by painting this picture the way we organically saw it at the time. We knew we were going here, we knew it was an island, the island had many trees, and the island had a bunch of anime pseudo rides. So my friend Mike had already come here. Mike came here about 5 years ago, and at that point the park was just starting out and had distinctly marketed itself only as Dragon Quest Island, and he apparently had an amazing time doing just that. Now, Dragon Quest Island had gone so well that the park grew to have 6 other experiences. But these experiences are severely different in terms of quality and what they are, and I guess this information I'm telling you is kind of vital because I've never seen anyone fully break it down in English before. But basically, what's annoying about Nijigen no Mori is that all the rides are kind of similar with a few exceptions. And what's weird is the rides also all have 3 tiers of tickets you can buy, hence why it's a tourist trap. What I'm saying is you can buy different price tickets for the ride and you'll get a different experience out of the ride. If you pay $10, you get the basic ride, which is what you would expect of your average theme park ride. But if you pay $20, maybe $30, you'll get a silver ride, sometimes called a double ride. The double ride is kind of hard to explain because all the rides deal with what a double ride is differently. But in general, long story short, you pay twice as much money to get twice as much ride. Or in some places, you get a second ride that's different after the first ride. Now, I'll break this down more specifically as we go along, but in other places, it's like the double ride is actually the full ride, and the $10 base ticket makes you quit halfway through the ride, which is effing stupid. Like, imagine going on a super fun roller coaster and then halfway through you're being told that you got to get off because you've been paying enough money to ride the full length of the track, just the first half. There's nothing exactly like that, but it did feel kind of insulting that in one area it did play out like that. Now then, finally, for $100 freaking, there is the gold class luxury ticket, which seems to be the double ride ticket, but on top of that, you get a hyper exclusive anime collector's backpack. So the complication here is that these backpacks are very rare and a lot of people want them, but the only way to buy them is to buy them packaged with this ride deal. And I'll get back into it later, but long story short, apparently a lot of people come to this park just to buy the freaking backpacks. Okay, with that basic information down, our next problem was getting there. And I should mention that Awaji Island is kind of this famous island in the middle of nowhere, and it's well regarded for its tropical vistas, and it's minorly famous for being the epicenter of the Great Kansai earthquake that hit in like 1994, I think. Anyway, despite being surrounded by major Japanese cities of Kobe, Osaka, and Kyoto, Awaji is kind of a weird island that somehow got left behind by modern society. It's home to a lot of like recluse farmers and recurse societies. And in 1998, the island's luck finally changed around when a massive change happened and the island was connected to Kobe via the Akashi Kaikyo Bridge, the world's largest bridge at the time, in 1998. It's currently the second largest Turkey-built bigger bridge. Anyway, the history of the bridge is also super crazy. The bridge was originally commissioned in 1957, and then in 1973, the bridge was partially constructed, but they kind of just gave up on it and quit construction. Then 15 years later in 1988, they started up again, and the bridge was finally finished in 1996. But then even though it was finished in 1996, for 2 years, they didn't use the bridge and they didn't open to the public until 1998 because they had some slight concerns that maybe it wasn't safe or something. Now, I should also point out that the Akashi Kaikyo Bridge is almost twice as large, twice as long, and twice as tall as the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, but since it's not red, no one gives a damn. That's kind of funny. Anyway, I've never really gotten into this, but I also have a huge childhood trauma, fear of bridges, growing up into Atlantic City, where every once in a while I'd see someone fall off a bridge. And it has left me with something of an on-again, off-again fear of bridges that comes and goes and seems to get worse if I'm driving a car off them because I kind of just feel like in the back of my head, what if a big gust of wind comes along and pushes my car off the bridge? Anyway, luckily, to avoid the Akashi Kaikyo Bridge, there's an alternative form of entry to Nijigen no Mori, the ferry. The ferry conveniently also leaves from the World's Fair, which was right by us, so all we had to do was get back to the World's Fair and we could take the ferry. Unfortunately, we didn't take the ferry. After leaving USJ City Walk, I did see some sort of shuttle bus moving people back and forth to USJ to some sort of ferry, but it seemed that the some sort of ferry here was not going to Awaji Island. Damn. So after that, we tried to ask the cabbie that was nearby to take us to the ferry port at the World's Fair, which was definitely going there, but the cabbie straight up refused to help us. According to him, he was concerned that, according to the satellite view on Google Maps, the ferry at the World's Fair was either not working or not constructed. I think maybe it was there and maybe the satellite photo on Google was old, but then it also simultaneously showed the address and there were no roads connecting to it or reaching it. So yeah, that was kind of sus, so we overall decided not to take the ferry. Later on, we debated about using the ferry to return to Osaka, but we didn't see the ferry terminal when we got to Awaji either, so I don't know. If you made this trip and actually got the ferry to work, shout me out one in the comments because I'm really confused about this still. Anyway, so instead, the ferry was a bus, so we took the train over to Kobe, and then we had to take the fucking bus across the fucking bridge. Now, I should mention that I did not expect to end up in Kobe at all in this trip, so that was fun and nostalgic for me. And I should also mention that when I came to Japan for the first time ever, Kobe, and specifically this bridge, marked the farthest point that I traveled to the west in Japan. So ending up here today and actually going on it was a huge personal achievement for me because now I've surpassed my boundaries in the world again, and the world is a little bit bigger for me. Anyway, so now on this bus ride from Kobe to Awaji, Nijigen no Mori's tourist traps really started to click in. It was approximately 11 a.m., and it kind of occurred to me that every single person on this bus traveling to Awaji Island was a foreign, nerdy anime otaku just like the rest of us. This bus randomly had the soul of like a Florida anime con, but anyway, we rode it to the end and I started talking to some people on the bus, and I got into a really interesting chat with some bored people from Australia on the bus. Now, I was trying to sausage whether or not I ever want to go to Australia, and if I do I need a car? They did not give me any good answer, so I still don't know about that. But anyway, yeah, speaking to the Australians thoroughly distracted me from the terror of the world's largest bridge. And yeah, but then when I had to come back across it, all my anxiety kicked back in for no good reason. Anyway, they gave me a hypercritical tip that the tickets to this place are 50% cheaper if you buy them on Klook, and you can also buy them live on Klook and get them instantly, which is kind of crazy. So we bought all our tickets to the island on the bus, and then we were able to afford the Demon Slayer backpack as a result because we got 50% off and we only paid $50 for the backpack, not $100. And the ride was included. So yeah, we arrived on Awaji and we passed by this random replica of Fred Flintstone's house. I found a picture of it on Google Maps, but I want to say it's been updated to look more closely like Fred Flintstone's house now. Like they added the Flintstone scar and some dinosaurs. We finally got to Nijigen no Mori, and it is a super complicated tourist trap. And as usual, there is a certain level of FOMO here. Okay, so to fully explain what Nijigen no Mori is, because I was just told it was a big anime theme park, it's not exactly a theme park. It's like in a transitional state of eventually becoming one, but I would say currently that's not what it is. Nijigen no Mori used to be Awaji Island Hyogo State Park, and its initial state, 80% of the land here is just good old-fashioned, undeveloped national park land with forest and trails and camping land and pristine, undeveloped forest land of Awaji Island. And once again, Pokemon Gold references. This is the Pokemon Heart Gold Soul Silver Safari Zone where we're at. So another aspect of this tourist trap is that Awaji markets itself as Japan's largest anime theme park, and it kind of is, but that's a tourist trap because it's mostly just incorporating hundreds of acres of pre-existing natural parkland, and there's really only 6 things to do here. So it's the world's largest anime park with 6 things to do. Anyway, so yeah, 5 years ago, Nijigen started with only the Dragon Quest experience, but now it's grown from there and they've added a bunch of other rides. Well, 5 other rides. The trap thing is that the place presents itself as a full theme park, and it's totally not. It's just an open-air national park that is slowly filling itself with theme park rides to attract tourists. It's a very, very abnormal park. It's like the park is in the process of becoming a theme park, but it's becoming it in a strange, weird, slow way, and it's just not quite there yet. It doesn't have the density or the quality you'd expect of even like a bad theme park like the Saitama Land we visited at the start of the trip. The park also has its own anime-themed hotels with rooms to match the rides and the zones in the park. I have no idea where this hotel is. I did not see it anywhere near the park. I did see it online and it looks kind of nice, but I don't know where it is. Now, I didn't do the Dragon Quest Island experience. I know that uses some sort of like an amiibo save file technology to track your progress as you quest across the island solving puzzles and fighting video game monsters. And apparently the park's current Monster Hunter quest is the same thing, but even harder. We did stop at the Dragon Quest diner for a light lunch because we came to it first and we were hungry. The diner sells several onion-based dishes with the onions dressed up as Dragon Quest slimes. This is apparently because Awaji Island's #1 export is apparently special onions. Anyway, so let me get down to what I was here to do. I came here to see the 1/1 statue of Shin Godzilla, which is honestly impressive as hell. I'm actually really glad I came here to see it. Also, guy who was looking for a 1/1 Godzilla statue, this is the one. This is the best one. It is way bigger, way more detailed than the Heisei Godzilla head in Kabukicho. It's like basically like a giant, like full-size bust of Shin Godzilla. And from far away, you can really, really appreciate sure as hell that this is Godzilla. So the first thing I did here was I bought the $10 basic ticket to experience the Godzilla ride, which for $10 you get to watch the special Awaji Island Godzilla movie, and then you get to zipline into the dead corpse of Shin Godzilla. And finally, the third phase is there's a shooting gallery based on that one scene in Shin Godzilla where like they were army guys shooting Godzilla cells, and you do it with a laser tag gun. Now, what bummed me out, though, is I didn't know that for $22 on the silver ticket package, you additionally get entrance into Awaji Island's Godzilla Museum, and that's what the silver ticket is. The extra bonus for the extra $10 is you get to walk into the museum. Now, I kind of saw enough through the doors of the museum that I wasn't super upset, but what did upset me was that apparently there was just no reality where I paid $10 more to upgrade my tickets to silver rank, and what pissed me off is they were very unclear about what the difference between basic and silver is. I knew like with gold you get the backpack, but I never knew from ride to ride what the specific upgrade for silver rank is. And apparently I had to buy a whole separate additional ride package to get into the museum, and that pissed me the fuck off. Anyway, I can see from other people's YouTube videos of going inside the museum that it's a pretty lackluster museum. Not worth $10, maybe worth $5 or $3. You can see a couple of classic props from some old Godzilla movies and a couple of interesting fan dioramas to keep it unique and special. But overall, I really don't feel like I missed out not going to the museum, but I was infuriated and angry that they wouldn't simply allow me to upgrade my ticket to silver rank to go into the museum, because I would have done that in a heartbeat if they had just let me. Anyway, that's pretty typical Japan for you. Amazing products with absolutely dog shit terrible customer service as usual. Anyway, so let's get down what I did do. Seemingly the best part of the experience was watching Awaji's Shin Godzilla 2, a theme park exclusive Shin Godzilla short film sequel, which is very weird because it's both a sequel and not a sequel. It seems to completely ignore the events of Shin Godzilla, but tells a very similar story to them about a different Shin Godzilla, the one on Awaji Island. The big difference though is that in this Shin Godzilla story, Shin Godzilla is not a random nuclear mutation caused by the Fukushima power plant. He is an ancient hell dragon entity that Japan has just constantly known and constantly lived with since prehistoric times. And personally, I think that's crazy. That's a crazy idea to explore. I kind of would like to see that in a movie. Anyway, the movie glosses over what has happened, but apparently Japan has just been living with Godzilla the past 5,000 years and been very annoyed with him, but never tried to stop him. And what's kind of interesting with this movie is that it really, really ties into the whole like idea that Godzilla at the end of the day is like a natural disaster, like an earthquake or a tsunami, and you just have to like fucking live with him. Until now. So then the events play out at the end of the movie that, similar to the climax of Shin Godzilla where Godzilla gets frozen in place, same thing happens here, and that's the backstory of the statue. It's not a Godzilla statue, it is the real honest-to-God Shin Godzilla after they froze him in the last quarter of the movie and when he couldn't move. So then the movie flips to a ride preparation video and tells you that you have to zipline over to Godzilla and shoot his Godzilla cells off, and that's the ride. Anyway, so then you go to a locker room, put your stuff in a locker, get the zip line on, and launch over the zip line into the mouth of Godzilla. Now, it's been a minute since I last did a zip line, and I had some serious anxiety climbing up this super scary zip line launch tower, but then after I got on the zip line, I totally forgot that I love zip lines. I just haven't done one in such a long time that it had been like so long since I'd done one that I completely forgot what it was like. But yeah, I had a feeling of massive stress turning into huge relief, and it was great. Anyway, yeah, so I ziplined into the giant Godzilla statue, and that was kind of a really amazing experience that I think I'll remember for hopefully the rest of my life. Now, the Godzilla shooting cell stage after the fact, that was not so great. Half the guns were broken and not well maintained, and the Godzilla cell receptors were also kind of just like flashing light bulbs. And I gotta leave here in the review that I basically gave up on this part about 2 minutes in because it just looked like garbage. It was super hot, and broken laser tag guns shooting at broken light bulbs just didn't feel like it was worth my time. So yeah, aside from that, the whole experience basically was really short. I want to say I ran through the whole thing in 12 minutes. And then yeah, after the fact, super mad I could not enter the Godzilla Museum without buying a second silver class ticket and redoing the whole zipline experience. All right, so that was my experience on Nijigen no Mori, but that wasn't the only thing we did there. My friends weren't into Godzilla as much as I was, so they were there to do the Demon Slayer activity. Now, what sucks is the Godzilla experience is pretty much at the front gate, and the Demon Slayer thing is at the back gate, so we had to walk through the entire forest to get there, but I was okay with that because that gave me a chance to scope everything out. I sense that the Dragon Quest and the Monster Hunter areas are like the front east section, and the Godzilla is the front west, and then in the middle there's like a massive Crayon Shinchan playground. That didn't interest us. And we also passed by Naruto World. Naruto World is also kind of a playground. It has like this ninja obstacle course, and it has like the Ichiraku ramen shop. I did this great shot of the Naruto characters at the gate, and that did kind of look really enticing to me. I don't know. I kind of agonized over going into Naruto World or not because it mostly just looked like a playground, but I did kind of want the hyper-exclusive backpack. The hyper-exclusive backpack here was Gaara's Gourd. The gourd itself being a hyper-limited, hyper-value collector's item. Super valuable on online with resellers due to tariffs. And it was one of those whole, like, crazy things that you can only buy right here by going on this ride. Now, I did see someone buy one there, and it looked like this, like, crazy giant rucksack, and I was kind of into it. Anyway, I might as well just mention here about the other backpacks I know about. I did see the Shin Godzilla one, and it was surprisingly the smallest one. It was basically a purse, and it was just a cute plushy Shin Godzilla that you could put stuff in. The Dragon Quest one was a giant tote bag shaped like the King Slime, and the Naruto one was obviously the Gaara Gourd. I have no clue if there was a Shin-Chan one or a Monster Hunter one. I would take a wild guess that maybe the Monster Hunter one would be a fake sword. And then finally, my friends who went to the Demon Slayer park, they got their super limited Nezuko containing Tanjiro main character backpack. I gotta say, this was the smartest thing we bought on the entire trip. This is one of the hugest backpacks I've ever seen in my life. And it was double the size of the backpack we had brought into Japan. So we were basically able to shove like 3 of our otherwise small luggage bags that we were carrying with us into this thing by itself. Not only is this one of the most sickest hyper-limited anime backpacks from crazy old Awaji Island I've ever seen, it is also no cap one of the largest and most functional backpacks I've ever seen in my life. Going through Japan up to now with all the anime merch we bought has been a nightmare, but buying the Tanjiro back instantly made our lives instantly better. Alright, so one last thing about the Demon Slayer quest. The Demon Slayer quest is also kind of a light tourist trap. The Demon Slayer quest is basically hiking, and at the basic level, you get a workbook to solve riddles. And there's a bunch of riddles sprinkled throughout the forest in the form of Demon Slayer enemies. And then at the silver level, you get a second workbook with even harder riddles. So once again, I bought the $10 basic ticket here, but since my friends got the gold ticket with the backpack and everything, they also got the second workbook. And apparently there was really nothing I was missing by just looking at their workbook and living vicariously through them. I kind of now regret that I bought the workbook for myself at all. And once again, I have FOMO that I just didn't buy the silver Godzilla ticket with the museum entrance in the first place. I guess overall, the lesson I've learned here is that even though they offer 3 tiers of tickets, you really want to buy silver tickets as much as possible, unless you're like a backpack collector. Anyway, yeah, so back to reviewing things. The Godzilla Zipline tour and the movie and the museum was super, super cool for me as a Godzilla fan. The Demon Slayer tour was not as great, aside for the super functional Tanjiro backpack, basically justifying the entire cost of coming here. Like, all we really did on the Demon Slayer thing was we walked around a bunch of hiking tours in the park, and every so often a cardboard cutout of a Demon Slayer enemy would pop up and ask us a very second grade level riddle, and it was very simple. I should stress that if you're doing this with multiple people, just buy one ticket and share the damn workbook. You'll save some money, and especially if it means the difference between buying 3 trashy workbooks or buying 1 workbook and getting the Tanjiro bag, definitely do it like that. The Tanjiro bag is so fucking good, man. You have no idea. Anyway, I found out while we were walking along this path that apparently this ride also used to be a Bleach experience, but when Bleach stopped being cool, it was quickly rethemed around Demon Slayer, and that's kind of funny. Apparently at night, there's also a cooler nighttime version of this experience with like lasers and like lanterns and cooler stuff, but I don't know if that's worth it either. I mean, I guess it looks better and you're not in the sun. It did have a cooler commercial, but in the end, it's still, at the end of the day, a hiking trip that's being disguised and encouraged by anime cutouts. So, you know, if you're not into hiking, I wouldn't recommend coming here. Anyway, we solved all the riddles from the Demon Slayer bad guys. We bought some ice cream, and that was Ninjagen no Mori. After that, we went back over the bridge to Kobe, causing me massive anxiety, took the train all the way back to USJ, hopped in a cab, and went to our next hotel located in Osaka's scenic Namba district. This was probably the best hotel of our entire trip in terms of being one of the both largest and cheapest hotels we stayed in. The bathroom kind of sucked again, but again, it was probably the hugest room we stayed in the entire trip. Tomorrow, we're going to Toei Studios, home of Super Sentai, Kamen Rider Museum, and the 1-1 Evangelion, and a bunch of corny ninja magic crap. All right, so hey, welcome back. I'm me, Buster Green. This is the Anime Tourist Trap Trip, and in this episode, I'm on my way to check out Toei Studios in Kyoto, home of the Super Sentai / Power Rangers Museum, the 1-1 Evangelion, and otherwise some old school classic Ninja Samurai attractions from the ancient days of Japan. Anyway, I was considering reviewing Su-Tentaku, aka Good Old Osaka Tower, the radio tower from Pokemon Gold. But we got here pretty late at night after commuting all the way here from Awaji, and I didn't feel like going inside, so I kind of just had dinner here, and yeah, I don't feel qualified reviewing it. Nonetheless, I found the old Osaka district incredibly charming, and I can definitely see why so many people fall in love with it and have spoken of it greatly over the years. And it's crazy, but it does make a great alternative to Dotonbori if you're staying in Osaka for more than a single night. Now, I could definitely see myself going back here some more to explore it in a little bit more detail. It has great food and kind of a noticeable Vietnamese presence. Anyway, the next day we checked out our cool hotel and headed for our next destination, Toei Studios in Kyoto. Now, I wanted to get breakfast in Osaka, but we didn't have time, so we went on to Kyoto. And what's important was this was one of the only days we were traveling city to city with our full arsenal of luggage with us, which is painful. Now, Kyoto was trouble as there was no practical way to store our luggage here, and personally I also had no interest in staying at a hotel in Kyoto because past adventures coming here have historically proven it just to be a very difficult place to book a hotel. There's like no hotels with vacancies, and even if you find one, you're paying an arm and a leg. So up until now, we've gotten pretty lucky, even though we overdid it with our first day shopping, that we've mostly managed to transport our luggage from hotel to hotel without too much trouble. Except now we had all our luggage, and that was trouble. Now, yesterday, while transporting to Awaji, we had briefly stopped in Kobe, and while we were changing stations from train to bus, I saw a sign for something called Radical Storage. And it turns out they had one at one of the major stations in Kyoto we needed to use as a transit hub. So I tried on the spot to use Radical Storage in Kyoto to just get rid of our luggage. And we got to the station, I opened up the app and I paid $20 to the app. And then I got very confused because the app seemed to indicate that it wanted us to bring our luggage to some random person's house. Now this turned out to be entirely wrong, but I was semi-convinced it was maybe like an underground situation where maybe the train station had like an underground shopping mall or a tunnel, and that was what Radical Storage was, some sort of like sewer storage. But long story short, it wasn't the house. The app gave me the wrong address. So I took a few more minutes to soak in the information. I eventually figured out what was going on. Radical Storage is this crazy new app that basically works kind of like Uber or Airbnb, except in the dumbest way possible. Instead of Uber letting you rent someone's car or Airbnb letting you rent someone's house, this lets you rent someone's closet and put your luggage inside. Yeah, people are renting out their goddamn closets now. The economy is bleak. Anyway, having figured that all out, the address on the map was still totally wrong, but we had apparently signed up to store our luggage in a local curry restaurant slightly down the road. So we went down the road, talked to the owner, and confirmed that he was doing that. That is a legit thing he does. We put our luggage in a goddamn baby playpen, and off we went to have a wonderful day in Kyoto. Now, we stopped at a quirky Japanese-Italian restaurant where we got some so-so rice alfredo. Then we went to Toei Studios, one of our final great tourist traps, and one of the definite last anime ones. Anyway, so as always, is Toei Studios a tourist trap?
この番組はヨランのスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
Okay, this one's kind of complicated. It is a trap because the main reason I came here was to have an awesome Kamen Rider Sentai experience, and that actually turned out to be one of the worst things about this place. It's not well maintained. But maybe it isn't a trap, as the experience was otherwise a pretty cheap thing to do, and there is one really terrific thing that completely justifies coming here. Okay, so Toei Studios being a tourist trap, I guess is mostly based on the price breakdown. So if you're just an adult walking into Toei Studios, you have to pay $28, but that's to do nothing. If you want one of the ride passes, then the price raises up to $42. If you don't get the ride passes, though, you can pay the rides a la carte for $6 each, and 6 times 4 is 24. So essentially, if you buy the ride pass, you're getting $10 off on doing the rides, or another way to think of it is you're getting 1.5 rides for free. Now, in my opinion, 3 out of the 4 rides are good, so yeah, it's worth it to save money and get the worst ride for free. Oh, and I should probably tell you guys that even though we arrived here at like, I want to say 1 o'clock on like a Wednesday, we were the only people in here almost the entire day. Like, I want to say 10 people showed up to watch like the ninja show at the end of the afternoon, and that was it. Otherwise, we had the entire park to ourselves, and that was a little nuts. All right, so let's get into what we did here. So you entered the studio through the gift shop. The gift shop was incredibly disappointing. One of the reasons I came here was I was kind of hoping there would be like some Sentai Kamen Rider merch, and maybe I could get some like rare Kamen Rider toys. I really wanted to get like a really good Kamen Rider belt, but the merch here was overall lackluster. They did have like some Kamen Rider themed like hair berets for women, and that was kind of it. I was kind of really let down by the selection of Kamen Rider shit they had here. They did have some random Godzilla shit here, which was weird because otherwise this park has no connection to Godzilla. Anyway, so we went upstairs to the first attraction, the Wooden Fortress, and I officially want to say this is the worst ride in the park, and I'm glad we did it first. It's basically a cross between a giant jungle gym / giant funhouse, and despite being in an air-conditioned gymnasium room, it was still very hot crawling through all this like wooden corridors and everything, and was hot enough to make me sad and angry with it. I've kind of realized recently as an adult that I get kind of frustrated and angry when I'm in a maze and I just can't quit out of it, and yeah, the whole thing was uncomfortable. After that, we went to attraction number 2, the Super Sentai Kamen Rider Museum, which is technically included with the price of entry. So, okay, so this is the big question of the day. Is the Kamen Rider / Power Ranger Museum a tourist trap? Yeah, sadly it is. Being here was mad depressing. I would qualify this less as a museum and more of a storage closet for old tokusatsu uniforms. While it's amazing to see all these historical toku suits preserved and like in a room somewhere and a couple of their bikes, they're unfortunately sitting in this dusty old linoleum room that has very liminal abandoned shopping mall energy. And what's worse is that the suits are pretty jam-packed in here, so you can't really like even appreciate them all. Like, they're also right next to a very large backroom space, so I want to think that they could space these guys out better and make this a much better experience. Maybe have some interesting factoids here, maybe have some games. This place could be fun, but it's just not. It's a complete tourist trap, and it's overall one of the most disappointing places I've visited on this trip. I want to say this is maybe the #1 disappointing tourist trap I've been to, in terms of it actually being a thing, but being so much worse than advertised. Now, after that, we went outside. We briefly stepped through a Meiji-era movie set, and then we went out back to check out the 1-1 EVA. Now, I was very impressed by the 1-1 EVA staying in a pool of anime-accurate nasty red water, and climbing up the top of the Evangelion was also very fun. While we were climbing it, there were a bunch of cool anime factoids on the walls and the stairs, and my friends kind of gave me some shit for not stopping to read them, but it was still 120 degrees outside, and all this info was basic noob shit that anyone who watched the first episode of EVA would instantly know. I sat in the plug, got my picture taken, and because it was 120 degrees, my picture looked terrible. I looked like a disgusting melt man melting in the sun. Anyway, I kind of realized that I looked terrible this entire trip, and now that I'm back in America, I look normal again, and I'm wondering what's up with that. Apparently, I was suffering from some sort of 120 degree weather fluid heat retention phenomena, and that sucked. Anyway, after that, we went to the first of the 3 good rides at Kyoto Park, the Ninja Mansion of Ninja Secrets. This is a fun house escape room activity modeled after a classic Ninja Mansion, where you get stuck through a series of funhouse rooms that have really obvious ninja escape exits. Now, I think I was really good at this because I've seen enough tokusatsu shows and enough ninja shows in my day that I kind of borderline rushed through it, and I kind of regret that now after the fact because I'm pretty sure if I hadn't rushed through it, my friends would have floundered in here for hours, and I could have just sat in the air condition watching them suffer. But no, I had to take the initiative and escape. The next good ride at the park is the Ghost House. Now, I actually give this Kyoto Ghost House a ton of credit for being one of the creepiest haunted houses I've ever been to, just because it was quiet. I don't know, I've just never been to a haunted house that was this quiet before. It also had really intense and accurate vibes of like being like an old Japanese horror film. I don't know what it was, maybe just all the practical effects, but it really did look like I was walking through a 1970s horror film. And then the final good ride was the balloon sword course for kids. Now, we did this even though we weren't kids because we paid for it, but I actually thought this ride was great. Like, we had like a big sword and we got to like hit a wooden man with it. And over the course of the activity course, we got a bunch of balloon swords, and I kind of love the balloon swords. This balloon sword is actually one of the most solid balloons I've ever owned in my life. It survived the trip back to America and everything. I hope we never pop it. I hope it'll last forever. Now, after that, there was only one thing left to do at the Samurai Park, which was a stage show about the story of Gallant Jiraiya or something. But we missed the 1 o'clock show, so then we had to linger there and wait for the 3 o'clock show, which I want to say by this point it was probably 2, so we had like an hour to sit around. While we sat around, we ended up waiting at probably the most magical place in the entire park, the last Evangelion Cafe in Japan. So I want to just put this into context for you guys. When I lived in Japan in 2011, Evangelion 2.2 had just come out, and EVA was pretty much everywhere. EVA is like this historical landmark anime in Japan that like held strong throughout the 90s as a major cultural pop culture touchstone. And even back then, I remember EVA was just everywhere. There were EVA stores. There was even like an Evangelion pop-up bar in Kabukicho, but somehow nowadays, even though the Rebuild series has just wrapped up and Studio Khara is still going strong with everything like G-Quux and Shin Kamen Rider and Shin Godzilla, Evangelion seems like it's slowly, eventually fading away and dying in the Japanese consciousness, which kind of bummed me out. I mean, looking into it on Google Maps real quick, it looks like there's still about 5 Evangelion merchandise stores still holding strong between Osaka and Tokyo, which is probably a big deal because I remember back in 2011 there was like one crazy YouTuber who claimed he could live exclusively on like Asuka licensed Evangelion products. But yeah, today we had lunch and hung out at the last Evangelion cafe in the world, and it was wonderful. I ate a giant Hawaii-style shaved ice, and overall I was just really happy being here. I was kind of impressed that they have exclusive Evangelion Samurai vs. Ninja items here to stay on the Samurai Village theming, but yeah, otherwise the only thing we got here was the shaved ice, but I don't know, this was just a really peaceful place and there was something comforting about being here. Probably all the Shiro Sugisu background music synced perfectly with everything we were doing in here, but yeah, I was just so happy coming here. So then after that, we watched the Jiraiya show. It was okay, and it was kind of nice to see a semi-live tokusatsu performance, and then we left the studio. I'm overall satisfied with Toei Studios as a whole. Ironically, I enjoyed the 3 rides in the Evangelion Cafe the most, but I guess I have to say that some parts of it are just not as well maintained as the others, and that's why it's a tourist trap. I think it's just kind of out of whack. I think the price is too expensive when you consider that for just like an extra $30 though. I could have had an extra day in Universal Studios Japan. Alright, so after this, me and my friends had a minor argument. Even though we had a time limit to get our bags and get out of Kyoto, my friends were upset that we had gone all the way to Kyoto and not done any cliche touristy shrine hopping, which, quite frankly, I've done a bunch in the past and they've done a bunch in the past, so I don't see why we had to do it again. Anyway, as we were walking home from Toei Studios, we passed the Kyoryugen Shrine, home to the statue of Miroku, who I guess is the monk that the Miroku from Inuyasha is named after. So we went there and we saw that. Now, it was a very cool, very holy place to go to, but overall, I just found it slightly not as cool as a random statue across the street of Gintoki Sakata from Gintama. Now, yeah, across the street, across from the 5,000-year-old shrine of Miroku, was a random statue of Gintoki from Gintama in front of a Lawson. So after this, me and my friends had a huge argument after this, because while I was completely unimpressed to see the 7,000-year-old statue of Miroku and the holy shrine where it was held, I was so stoked and borderline moved to tears to see the statue of Gintoki. And I don't know what to say here, but this was a very choice A, choice B kind of situation where I had to choose between a 7,000-year-old statue of a stranger that means literally nothing to me, that I've never heard about, that I've never seen before, and that I'll never see again, versus a statue that is probably less than 7,000 years old, but of a man who was basically like a father to me and has entertained me so heartedly since the time of the Nintendo Wii. I don't know about you, man, but seeing Gintoki randomly on the street just filled my heart instantly with joy, whereas paying to see the statue of Miroku was cool and all, but I was mostly upset that I had paid money to see it, and then when I saw it, I felt nothing. Maybe I'll never think about it again, maybe I'll think of it next time I watch Inuyasha, but I mean, if the question is 1-to-1 which made me happier, Gintoki statue, 1,000%. If the question was what was the more valuable memory, once again, Gintoki statue. That random Gintoki statue kind of made my day. I'm sure there's a historical reason that the statue of Miroku has survived the past 7,000 years, but I just don't have an emotional response to that, whereas seeing Gintoki fills me with nostalgia and joy. Anyway, that was the end of that day. We got on a bullet train and went to Atami. Okay, the series is almost over. We're going to Atami, and that's the end of the videos. So, yeah, next one is the last one. Hope you guys enjoyed all these. Later. Okay, hey everyone, it's me, Buster Green, and welcome to the last trip of the anime Tourist Trap series. We've come to Atami, the final frontier of Japan, and since this is the last place we're visiting, I'll also do some final conclusions here and kind of wrap up the series. Anyway, so I'm here today in Atami, a place I always wanted to visit on my last day in Japan in the past, and so this time, since it was my last time in Japan this time, I finally committed to doing it. Now, in terms of anime tourist traps, there's nothing super hyper-specific here. I had wanted to go to Hakone instead to do more Evangelion-inspired tourism, but Hakone is a lot harder to reach than Atami, so it really wasn't realistic on this trip because we kind of wasted too much time in other places doing other tourist traps. Now, if I have to draw some lines to anime here, Atami is where Koji Kabuto lived in Shin Mazinger Z Impact 10, and it's also the birthplace of Lupin, the third composer Yuji Ono, and I can kind of sort of feel his energy here because it has a distinct tropical island vibe despite otherwise being mainland Japan, and if I played any of his tracks, I'd feel perfectly at home here. Anyway, since we had wasted extra time in Kyoto with the whole statue of Moroku thing, and the related debate argument we got into afterwards about whether or not it was better than a statue of Gintoki, we ended up having to stay in a pretty shitty hotel because we got here late, and the only hotel available was a local Toyoko Inn, and it ended up being the dirtiest, stinkiest, worst hotel we stayed in our entire trip. So way to go, guys. Thanks for having a great argument with me. Now, I will say the sole silver lining of the Toyoko Inn was we've been avoiding on this whole trip Japanese breakfast buffets because most of them have been super expensive and you can get like breakfast for like 500 yen outside when like the average like buffet breakfast at a hotel is like 3,000 yen. But this place was really cool in that they gave us a free breakfast, and the free breakfast was great. I want to say they had a lot of items that they were offering that weren't really breakfast food, aside from some sweet omelets. Anyway, so we stashed our luggage at the hotel, and then we walked around to explore Atami. Now, I had wanted to go to the Atami Art Museum, but it turned out it was on top of a mountain, and we didn't see any way to get up there. Like, we would have had to climb the mountain or take a taxi up the mountain. It was a huge pain in the ass. So instead, we decided to go the other way down to the beach, and we spent most of the morning bumming around the old Atami shopping arcade. Now, one stupid thing I did in Atami was probably the most touristy thing to do here is to obtain Atami's special food item, the Atami pudding, which apparently comes in 3 potential flavors: normal flan flavor, strawberry cheesecake flavor, and green tea flavor. Definitely want to try either strawberry cheesecake or green tea. But the problem is that this is such a popular touristy item that getting one was basically impossible, or rather I fucked up my chance to get it. So I waited in line 20 minutes to get it, and when I got to the front of the line, guess what? Turns out I was in the pickup line, not the pay and order line. The pay and order line, meanwhile, went around the block in the other direction for like 3 whole blocks and seemingly ended in an empty alley that the pudding stand was basically using as a barn for human beings. Now, this whole development horrified me to my core, and I didn't want to stand in a fucking barn like I was a fucking cow, so I gave up there after that, and I just bought a goddamn gelato instead. Later on, I got a similar but not the same company pudding at the train station, and I guess it was pretty goddamn pudding, so I guess I was satisfied with that, although it was smaller than the one they were selling in Atami. Anyway, after that, we took a walk up the hill to an onsen, and we saw this onsen that our hotel had given us authority to use. Maybe we should have gone to the beach instead, but I gotta say, the onsen that we use in Atami had this beautiful ocean view. But at the same time, it wasn't as good as the one we had used a few days ago in Kabukicho under the Sega Arcade. The Sega Arcade onsen was a little creepy and a little dirty looking, but it just overall had better facilities because I guess it got used more being in the center of Tokyo, so go figure. This onsen was in the middle of nowhere and it was really nice and all, but the facilities kind of sucked. Anyway, on the way out of the onsen, we did notice that they had this mega crazy retro 70s arcade with like original Mario Brothers and everything, and that was kind of cool. So, just wrapping up, should you guys come to Atami or not? And maybe, probably not, I don't know, unless you're just trying to have like a fun beach day. They did have like a castle and a museum that we weren't able to check out because they were both on dramatically high mountains at the outskirts of town. Anyway, we really just came here to catch our breath because we didn't feel like commuting all the way from Kyoto to Tokyo in one go. Atami is basically just an average beachside chill-out zone town. We did have a great time exploring the old shopping arcade. Just be mindful that the legendary Atami pudding is a tourist trap where they literally trap you inside a cow barn if you want one. Probably the most trap-worthy tourist trap in terms of actually putting human beings inside an uncomfortable place against their wishes. Okay, with that said and done, we were finished in Atami and we left Japan after that. As my final things, at the train station, I bought a Windscale hat and Super Robot Wars Y and a very strategic exit from Japan, and then we were gone. Now, alright, so this turned out to be a little short, so to fill out this video, let's talk about the trip as a whole, and I might as well do a final rank down of the top 10 worst anime tourist traps that I covered in the series and how bad they were all compared to each other.
この番組はヨランのスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
I'll even make this list a little bit more specific than my bigger videos by ranking things even if they were small, as long as they were cruel, mean, or tedious in a way that I felt was infuriating. Alright, so number 10 at the bottom of the list was the sad, barely maintained superhero museum in Kyoto. That just depressed me so much, man, and that was like my number one reason for going to Toei Studios. How did they fuck up Kamen Rider that bad? I don't even know. I wonder if there's like a more dedicated Kamen Rider museum somewhere else. Number 9 was the Haneda Robot Hotel, especially as I have now discovered that they're phasing out the robots, which is literally the main trap that attracted me there. Number 8 was Okamoto Taro's house, but I'm only ranking it as number 8 because of the lie that the house was on the same level as the Kanagawa Museum. But then again, I never saw the Kanagawa Museum, so maybe that's not a lie, and maybe the Kanagawa Museum also sucks. But right now, I think the Kanagawa Museum is better. Number 7 was Nijigen no Mori, and maybe just the Godzilla Museum here, because hearing that I had to buy a completely brand new ticket package to get into the Godzilla Museum made me basically rage quit the park. Number 6 was the Gundam Base Tokyo. So I got 10,000 hits on my video about this, and the Gundam Base Tokyo should probably be higher on my list, but my main complaint here was just that having a lottery to get inside the store when the store is obviously empty is pure anti-consumer. Now, I was also mad that I didn't get to buy the Unicorn Perfectibility, and that was bad too, but since I didn't even get inside, maybe it doesn't matter in the end. Number 5 was the expensive USJ Fast Passes, especially the one for the Detective Conan ride that we're semi-aggressively pushing, even though in the end, literally no one bought them and we all got them for free. I'm now hearing that technically you can even get into Nintendo World for free without a Fast Pass, but only if you arrive at the park at 5 a.m. and you bum rush to the Nintendo World gate, which doesn't sound safe or enjoyable to me, and I'm glad we had the pass in the end. Number 4 is the Atami Pudding. The Atami Pudding is somehow a nightmare. Like, just open up a goddamn store, you lunatics. I'm not an animal. I'm not going to be in a barn. I'm not going to be shoved in a barn like a fucking cow. You people are clearly making enough money. Open up a fucking second cash register already. Number 3 is the Nintendo power-up bands, mostly just on the annoyance that I couldn't buy them at any place except for the single stupid guy at the front of Nintendo Land. I now have serious FOMO about these because the way they handled it just pissed me off. Maybe this shouldn't even be on the list because I can technically buy them in America later, but just with the stupid tariff upcharge, so I'm so mad about this. Number 2 was the Patlabor experience, not mentioning that I need $120 to turn the robot on, and then sticker shocking me with that. I'm still mad about that. And number 1, probably the worst tourist trap of the entire trip, was just the Osaka 2025 Expo, and just the way it was so absolutely cruel and unfriendly to everyone visiting when it's supposed to be a World's Fair and not a Japan's Fair, and they really did not make it a fun place for the entire world. It was so difficult, so complicated, and the food was needlessly expensive, and yeah. Alright, so that's my top 10 list, but let me see if I can narrow it down and diffuse any of these. I'm going to eliminate anything on this list that, even if it was bad, I found some good in it. Like, okay, even though the Sentai Museum sucked, it led me to the Heavenly Eva Cafe, and the Eva Cafe made me so happy that day. The Robot Hotel, I can't eliminate that. That was definitely a trap. Taro's house was kind of fun. I at least bought some cool stuff here, and it was nice seeing that it was his actual house. Nijigen no Mori was kind of sketchy, but I definitely loved eating at the Dragon Quest Cafe. I definitely loved doing the Shin Gojira ride. And the Tanjiro backpack is maybe the best backpack I've ever had in my life, so I'm overall happy I went there. Gundam Base still has me pissed. That stays on the list. USJ cost me a lot of money, but I can't deny overall I wasn't super happy being there. Fuck Atami Pudding, there I said it. And I didn't buy the Universal Power-Up Band because the lines to use it were too long, so I guess I can eliminate that. Patlabor ride sucked, but I did have a good time and happy memories hanging out with my anime crew. And yeah, the World Expo overall sucked. So, okay, if I erase the ones that still made me happy in some minor way, despite being tourist traps, the final list of the 4 true worst irredeemable tourist traps in Japan in 2025 are the Robot Hotel, the Gundam Base Tokyo, the Atami Pudding, and the World Expo. Alright, so I guess that's that. Even though I feel like I could have probably done the World Expo better if I had a do-over, I can't go back to Japan. I'm broke, and that's insane. So yeah, in conclusion, that was the trip I took for summer vacation, and I guess beware of anime tourist traps. They're out there and they're waiting to steal your money, but fuck it, sometimes they're fun too. I guess the real devil of Japan is just actually anything that uses the lotteries to discourage people from coming, and anything that has a line wrapped around the block. I'm me, Buster Green, and I have no idea if I'll ever return to Japan again, but I guess I would like to. Alright, good night everybody.